So this time in our glorious loser list, we have this little guy who used to be the top S-rank hunter. G just soloed a dangling death trap in the sky that promises to grant any wish. He's ready to wish for world peace, get rid of all the dungeons and all that bullshit. But his friends were like, "Who said that, bitch?" And they clapped his sister right in front of him, let him watch her die, then sent his ass to the afterlife too. That's some peak and I'm villain level shit, not gonna lie. Fast forward 100 years later, our boy wakes up as some random F-rank loser only to find out that the backstabbing squad is alive all this time and have become humanity's top enemy. And guess what? Little sis is there too, but her brain got hit with the factory reset button and now she's out here being down bad for some sibling activities that would make Sweet Home Alabama jealous. In the sky hangs a dungeon, which is basically a cosmic scam promising to grant any wish to whoever clears it. For years, hunters have thrown themselves at this dangling death trap, hoping for a miracle and instead getting a one-way ticket to the afterlife. The best of the best, the S-rank hunters, have been beating their heads against this calamity, and today was Meguru's turn to play. He and his squad of hopefuls stepped into the boss room and were greeted by a giant serpent. And oh boy, the art of this manhwa is absolutely fire, I'm telling you. So as the beast hissed, the battle began and promptly went to shit, leaving Meguru all by himself to face this calamity. Thinking a monster of this level was no match for a badass like him, he whipped out his sword and charged headfirst into the fray. The snake, clearly not impressed by his S-rank swagger, lunged straight at him, forcing Meguru to dodge and take a step back. After a moment of dramatic posing, he decided he was done playing around. He activated his skill as violet sparks crackled in his hand and then his entire body. The snake attacked again, but Meguru was faster. He ducked under its massive body, looked up at its scaly underbelly, and jammed his hand upwards, unleashing a beam of pure energy. The violet blast rocketed straight through the serpent's skull as the monster fell dead on the floor. Seeing this, his surviving party members erupted in cheers. Later, gathered around a fire, a warrior-class hunter named Mayoshi Matsubara told Meguru how glad he was that Meguru was on their side. Then came Kana, the team's designated damsel and healer, who glomped onto him, cooing about how incredibly cool he was, but Meguru, patting her on the head, told her that he was only able to take down that monster because of her. As she beamed, his brain decided now was the perfect time for a trauma-fueled stroll down memory lane of a time when he and his family were ambushed by a pack of wolves, and being the absolutely useless person that he is, he got caught as one managed to sink its teeth into his hand, sending him tumbling to the ground. His father, armed with nothing but an iron stick and dad-level desperation, tried to fend off the beasts. Meguru, frozen in a state of useless panic, could only watch. His father, seeing his son was about to do something stupid, screamed at him to take Kana and run. When Meguru hesitated, his father pulled out the ultimate guilt trip card, ordering him to run, as that was the order of the head of the family. As Meguru stood there like a dumbass, not knowing how to act in this situation, his mother grabbed his hand as she leaned in close and told him to run away with Kana, stating that he was still having doubt, so she hit him with the line, "The worst thing a child can do is to die before their parents." Staring at his mother in horror, Meguru realized his parents were dead set on becoming wolf bait to save their kids. He understood he wasn't strong enough, but their sheer determination to die was all he could do for them to fulfill their last wish. Gritting his teeth, he told his parents he understood, promising to protect Kana. His father, bless his suicidal heart, smiled in relief just as a dog lunged at him. This dog looks more cute than terrifying. With his last breath, he screamed for them to run, and Meguru grabbed Kana's hand and booked it into an alley without a second glance. Snapping back to the present, holding on to Kana, he thought to himself how he wasn't alone because he had someone to protect. He told the group to set up camp, and Mayoshi noted that since the floor boss was dead, they could finally relax without a fear of being ambushed in their sleep. As they settled around the fire, Mayoshi took a sip from a bottle and complained about their rations. Meguru, staring into the flames, thought how if they cleared this dungeon, their lives would change. They won't have to worry about the monsters, because the one who clears the dungeon can ask the gods for anything, and his wish will be to destroy every last dungeon. And of course, as he said that, the group went dead silent, the only sound being the crackling fire and Mayoshi awkwardly looking away before muttering that he was right. Just like that, 2 weeks passed, they cleared one floor after the other, and now they were standing before the final boss, who happens to be a fire dragon. It was time for the final boss, and as it breathed a welcoming plume of fire, Meguru commanded everyone to their positions. With coordinated attacks, the hunters unleashed their attacks. The healer girl launched some magic, probably expecting it to do something, and watched in horror as it did absolutely jack shit. Meguru's eyes widened as their combined assault barely managed to chip a few scales off the beast. He decided it was time for his main character moment, drawing his swords and thinking he needed to concentrate all of his strength into one epic attack. He charged forward with all the unearned confidence in the world and was immediately bitch-slapped by the dragon's tail, sending him flying into a wall. Kana rushed to his side, asking if he was okay as she healed his knee. As the magic stitched his skin back together, a thought finally penetrated Meguru's thick skull. He realized something so profound, so groundbreaking, that it was a miracle the dungeon didn't collapse from the sheer weight of his intellect. He yelled to the others, explaining his plans, and then we are hit with his internal monologue of how it had taken him 2 full weeks and a near-death experience via tail whip to finally grasp the novel concept of fighting together as a team. Until that very moment, he hadn't trusted anyone but Kana. But now, after getting his ass handed to him, he was suddenly sure that his comrades would definitely cover his back. And at this point, you can smell the betrayal coming from miles away. With the sudden, earth-shattering realization that only someone with a jobless class could possibly defeat the final boss, Meguru soared towards the dragon from above, thinking how he wasn't a magician or a swordsman, but some magnificent, misunderstood hybrid of the two. As his sword ignited with magical energy, the rest of the group stood there with their mouths wide open as he swung his blade, thinking this would be the most powerful, most glorious finishing move in the history of dungeon crawling, and scream in triumph as the dragon crashed to the ground. I did it now, I can wish for world peace, but before he could even finish his victory speech, he felt an intense pain in his back. He turned to see that one of his comrades had just turned him into a human shish kebab. As the sword twisted, another was plunged into Kana, who dropped without a sound. Mayoshi, wiping a speck of blood from his cheek, leaned in close to Meguru and said the game of playing friends is over, telling him that they can't let him live as their point of view is too different. Meguru stared in disbelief as Mayoshi explained that he was the only one who wanted to destroy the dungeons. Another squad member chimed in, whining that he didn't want to lose the status he'd earned with blood and sweat. Enraged, he asked them, I understand how I can be a problem, but why did you kill Kana? Mayoshi shrugged. Isn't it obvious, dumbass? She would have snitched. Hearing this, Meguru's eyes blazed with fury as he shouted, You killed her for such a stupid reason? Mayoshi laughed in his face. Stupid reason? You and your idea of a perfect world are the only stupid things here. As he was poking holes in Meguru, he said, I don't know how a classless loser like you got this strong, but this is what happens when you cross the path of actual heroes. As his strength faded, Meguru thought to himself how he, who had picked the jobless class, had worked like hell to reach these heights only to be looked down on in his final moments, and they had to be his own friends. He thought to himself how he was a fool, an absolute grade A moron for trusting these backstabbing scum. And because of his idiocy, Kana was dead. As the last of his consciousness was slipping away, he thought to himself how he would never ever forgive them for this. And with that thought, our boy blinked into the abyss and passed out cold. He opened his eyes, not to pearly gates or hellfire, but to the mind-numbingly boring white ceiling of a hospital room. He looked at his hands, thinking, was that all a dream? But nah, he definitely remembered dying. He remembered those bastards killing Kana, and just like that, he started crying like a sad and protagonist. But right in the middle of that existential crisis, a nurse entered the room as it was time for his checkup. Seeing him awake, she got all surprised and asked Mr. Izumi, You're finally awake. Meguru's brain blue-screened. Who the hell is Izumi? The nurse called a doctor. The doc gave him a quick once-over and said to take it easy for a week. When Meguru tried to sit up, he felt the same intense pain in his stomach, making clear that everything he saw wasn't a dream. He glanced at the window, and the face staring back made his stomach drop. It was a complete stranger. Just as he was about to properly lose his shit, the door flew open, and Kana rushed in, calling his name. She broke down, her story spilling out between ugly sobs. By evening, the pieces of this whole ridiculous situation started to click. He and Kana got yeeted into the future, a full 100 years after the tower incident. She kept her face but lost her memories and was now on Alabama citizen behavior, which honestly seemed like a better deal. He, on the other hand, got a major downgrade. He was stuck with all his memories but was now stuck in the body of someone named Meguru Izumi, a hunter with the same useless, jobless class as him. To make matters worse, the original Meguru's memories were bouncing around in his skull. Kana, still trembling, explained that the body's previous owner got messed up fighting monsters, adding she was totally terrified that he wouldn't wake up. Meguru managed a weak smile until she left. The second the door closed, his face went hard, the smile evaporating into pure, unfiltered hatred. From Kana's story and his new fragmented memories, he got the full, infuriating picture. After they cleared the Sky Dungeon, the 6 other heroes who survived made a single wish to God, to become lords of the dungeons, instead of, world peace or something actually useful. These motherfuckers chose to become immortal, power-tripping landlords, each ruling their own territory. For 100 years, these so-called heroes had been living it up as eternal, dungeon-ruling dumbasses. He would never forgive them. He was going to find every last one of those arrogant pricks and personally serve them an eviction notice from life. Staring out the hospital window, Meguru started mapping out his interdimensional revenge tour. A couple of days later, Kana popped in, armed with a heavy dose of common sense. She grabbed his hand, her face all worried, and asked if maybe, just maybe, jumping straight into a dungeon after nearly dying was a bad idea. Plus, he should first focus on getting better. He just shot back that the only way to get strong enough to murder 6 immortals. Kana, still living in some fantasy world where just being alive was the point, didn't get it. Our boy internally sighed, 100 years later, and the jobless class was still the universe's biggest joke, useless at fighting, magic, and basically breathing. He patted her on the head and told her not to worry, saying, "A jobless loser like me always has an ace up their sleeve." Right on cue, as Kana was about to ask what the hell that meant, a couple of D-list thugs swaggered over. One of them looked at Meguru and said, "Well, look what we have here. He's not dead. For a jobless piece of trash, you're surprisingly tough." Kana looked lost, but Meguru knew exactly who these clowns were. The new memories told him these were the same lowlifes from Izumi's party, the ones who decided a bigger share of the loot was worth more than a teammate's life. The lead asshole licked his lips and slung an arm over Meguru's shoulder, saying, "You're lucky to be alive." What Meguru thought to himself, what better way to thank Izumi for the body than by taking out his trash? He let out a weary sigh and said, "Is this really how you ask for forgiveness from the guy you stabbed in the back?" The thug's face twisted in rage, somehow getting even uglier, something that I didn't think was possible. Swinging his fist, he said, "Did you forget your place? Looks like I'll have to remind you." He started yelling about being a rank D hunter while Meguru was an F-rank nobody, but he never finished his sad little speech. Meguru moved in a blur, his fist connecting with the guy's jaw so hard that blood sprayed from his mouth as he crashed into the wall. The second thug, seeing his buddy get absolutely wrecked, panicked and lunged with a knife. Meguru noted that sure, this body was weaker, but it was more than enough to handle these amateurs. He caught the blade between his fingers and wrenched it away. As the terrified thug stared in disbelief, Meguru snapped the blade in half. He asked them if they still wanted to fight, but nope, the two morons scrambled away and Kana just stared, her brain trying to compute what she just witnessed. She asked Meguru since when he had been this strong. This change is so sudden that it almost feels like he was a completely different person. Walking away from the hospital, Meguru replayed the sad excuse for a fight in his head. The verdict was he lost most of his physical juice, which was a goddamn shame. However, he could still channel magic. If he trained like he used to, this new, magically enhanced body could become even more of a monster than his last one. But in order to get strong, he needed to grind. And to grind fast, an F-rank hunter like him needed to punch above his weight class. Kana soon found themselves at the foot of an E-rank dungeon, where a group of hunters was waiting. He apologized for being late, and the leader lit a cigarette and grunted that it was time to go in. So now our boy is stuck in an ice cave with these absolute clowns. As the leader was going through team info, he saw Meguru's F-rank and jobless status and gave him a smug little grin before immediately checking out the party's eye candy, Kana. After they were deep enough in the dungeon, he stopped the group and announced that he and his hooded buddy would be delivering the final blow to the boss. He asks if anyone has a problem with that, but his tone makes it clear that an objection would be met with a swift kick in the teeth. The rest of the spineless party members shook their heads. Just as he was about to lay down another bullshit rule, Meguru cut in and said, "Why? Is that? Don't we all want a piece of the boss's loot?" The leader launched into a patronizing speech about how bosses get aggressive and how he, as the responsible leader, had to ensure the safety of his comrades, especially a useless F-ranker. Meguru cut him off again, stating that with proper tactics, everyone would be fine. That was the wrong button to push. The leader whipped out his sword, pressing it to Meguru's throat. His little henchman put a hand on Meguru's shoulder, magic already crackling in his palm, adding that the leader's word was law and weaklings should just shut up and follow orders. Kana looked terrified, but Meguru just stood there, internally sizing up the two morons threatening him. Was it really so strange to defend your own position? He let out his sigh, deciding to play along for now. The leader then added that he'd almost forgotten. All loot from the dungeon belonged to them. Meguru thought to himself how these gold-hungry clowns were running a full-on scam as they moved deeper into the cave toward their first target. Suddenly, a group of dungeon boars charged the group. The leader yelled for his B team to attack. The dagger-wielding guy and the archer girl rushed forward, chipping away at the mob's health bars. The leader just smirked, waiting for his moment to swoop in and steal the last hit. He and his fiery friend Zack finished off a couple of boars, patting themselves on the back. Meanwhile, a boar with a death wish charged straight for Meguru. He didn't even break a sweat, simply extending a hand and using magic. He then gracefully leaped over the charging beast, pointed his hand at the rest of the monster pack, and with another casual flick of magic, turned them all into exploding bacon bits. The leader, who had been too busy admiring his own reflection in his sword, stared in disbelief as he muttered to himself, "How did he just do that?" Just as a boar he completely missed slammed into him, sending him flying. Before he could even register the pain, Meguru's magic took care for the last pig. He calmly walked over, held out a boar's tusk, and said, "Here, you drop this." The leader snatched the tusk away, sputtering that he could have handled it himself. Meguru just sighed and dropped and said, "When a party member goes down, the whole team's chances of survival drop. Isn't that basic?" The leader, trembling on his feet, just screamed for everyone to move on. The trek through the dungeon felt like an eternity with these clowns, but they finally stumbled upon the main boss's room. The leader immediately singled out Meguru, telling him to stay back and look after everyone. Meguru just sighed while the rest of the party looked confused, but the leader assured them that he and Zatch would handle it. With that, the two morons rushed into the boss's chamber. In the center of the room sat a monstrosity that looked like a boar had a one-night stand with a nightmare. The boss was a hulking beast with 4 glowing eyes and a pair of leathery wings. The leader, high on his own supply of stupid, just grinned and charged at the boss while Zack provided support from the back and unleashed a stream of fire. A massive explosion shook the chamber, and the leader turned to his friend, shouting, "See how cool we are." But when the smoke cleared, revealing the monster standing there without a single scratch, smiling creepily, the 2 hunters froze in terror. In a flash, the beast's clawed paw shot out, cleanly severing both of the leader's hands at the wrist. A second later, the monster's magic lashed out at Zack, mangling his hands until bone peeked through his shredded fingers. The beast then grabbed them both. The leader shouted for it to let him go, but the monster, shockingly, did not give a damn and devoured him whole. It was Zack's turn next. He screamed for help, his final vision being a maw full of razor-sharp teeth before he was unceremoniously chomped in half. The rest of the party watched in silence as their leaders became a mid-dungeon snack. Meguru frowned, his mind racing. He thought about how even back in his time, the monsters in these types of dungeons were usually strong, but this time it's something else. He pursed his lips as he realized that this had to be a hidden dungeon. He drew his sword and pushed Kana to the back as he stood opposite the monster. As the massacre unfolded, the remaining squad members could only stare in wide-eyed terror. Seeing how Meguru was eyeing that thing, the green hat dude asked him, "Don't tell me, are you really going to fight that thing?" Meguru nodded, causing the guy to have a full-blown aneurysm as he started babbling about how it was disrespectful for an F-rank hunter to even think that. But Meguru had already done the mental calculus for his past experience as an S-rank. He could tell that this boss was at least a C-rank. With that, he jumped and charged at the boss, but the monster, completely unfazed, opened its massive maw and lunged back at him. Meguru, moving with a swift speed, easily sidestepped the attack as he thought to himself, "I'll never trust anyone again." He became a blur of motion as he landed a bunch of blows at the beast, and for the final touch, he decided to use magic attacks, but the pixie seemed to have the same idea as it launched its own blast of magic. He countered instantly by slamming his own magic into the attack and dispelling it. Just with the brief exchange of blows, he had realized that this wasn't going to be an easy fight. His current skills weren't enough to just brute force his way to victory. He had to be smarter. He decided to go for the monster's legs to restrict his movements. With a new plan clicking into place, he moved with blinding, decisive speed. A quick, clean slash and one of the beast's legs was gone. It shrieked in agony, but before it could even process the pain, Meguru had already moved to the other side and taken the second leg. Now that the winged monstrosity was thoroughly grounded, it was time for the grand finale. He leaped high into the air, his gaze locking onto the ceiling riddled with conveniently placed razor-sharp icicles. With a final explosive surge of magic, he didn't attack the boss. He attacked the ceiling, turning it into a deadly rain of frozen spears. Finally, they took care of the monster. As they did, silence descended upon the cave. They just stared, their brains struggling to process how an F-rank hunter had just soloed a boss. Just then, a brilliant light erupted from the monster's corpse, showering Meguru with the sweet, sweet spoils of victory. A mental notification pinged, informing him that all stats increased by 5 points. Just as he was thinking about something, Kana approached him and she said something that sent chills down Meguru's spine. "You aren't the same Meguru, are you?" Meguru's brain blue screened for a moment as he wondered, "Don't tell me she figured out that I'm a different person." He tried to bullshit his way out of it, but Kana wasn't having it as she said, "You were always reckless, but this is something else. There's no way you got this strong this fast. You've been hiding this power from me." Meguru just scratched the back of his head, for once unable to conjure a reply. With tears in her eyes, she asked, "Why? Were you hiding your powers from me? Army friends?" He looked at her, then patted her on the head and said, "I trained in secret to protect you, but internally the memory of their deaths burned bright." He had made a vow that day she would never ever see him helpless again. Later at the Hunter Association headquarters, as they reported what happened in the dungeon, the receptionist stared at them with disbelief and said, "Let me get this straight. You're telling me that he, an F-rank jobless hunter, single-handedly defeated a C-rank dungeon boss after 2 D-rank hunters were killed?" The archer girl, still shaken, insisted it was true, but the association drone wasn't buying it. He suggested that maybe the 2 survivors just murdered their leaders and pinned it on the boss, with Meguru swooping in to steal the credit. Hearing this, Kana started fuming, telling them that they would never do something like that, while Meguru simply scratched his head and said even the best hunters can die from a moment of carelessness, adding that her words just disrespected their fallen comrades. Seeing the looks in his eyes, the workers flinched as if slapped. Before they could ask for an apology, Meguru turned and walked away. As Kana shot a final glare at the dumbfounded staff and hurried after him, at the same time the head of the hunter department just so happened to be walking in. This guy's eyes locked onto the faint, dangerous aura practically vibrating off Meguru. With a piqued interest, he thought to himself, who is this guy? Outside, Kana caught up to Meguru, asking if he was sure about leaving the reward. He just shrugged and said, "I went in there for the XP, not the chump change," as he said that. A smile broke through Kana's frustration because that was the reckless dumbass she knew. They arrived at a familiar-looking apartment complex. After a quick goodbye, Meguru stepped into his new lonely apartment. He got into the bed, pulling out the phone. He fiddled with his smartphone for a moment, thinking how much the world had changed. Then a notification popped up, a breaking news alert. One of the 6 dungeon lords was coming to Japan. The news article featured a photo of Miyoshi Matsubara, and Meguru instantly remembered Stupid Face. He stared at the picture, then slowly sat up on the bed. He thought to himself how he didn't expect to meet one of his targets so soon. Meanwhile, halfway across the world in China, Miyoshi was having a classic supervillain moment, chilling in his lava-themed palace. He asked his subordinate if it was true that the other dungeon masters were slowing down. The man confirmed it, and Miyoshi let out a dramatic sigh, putting out his cigar. He said, "It's been 100 years. It's time for me to head out." As he strolled past his bowing underling, he waved a dismissive hand. "Don't worry about me. Have you forgotten who I am?" After a century of being a dungeon master, he conquered China and was getting bored. Now he had his sights set on Japan. Getting his hands on that territory would be the ultimate power move to rub it in his former friends' faces. He slid into a car, made a quick call, and ordered someone to start gathering troops. Back at the Hunter Association, Meguru was facing a far more mundane problem. He was looking for a dungeon to clear, but the receptionist turned him down by saying, "You're the jobless F rank. We don't have anything for you." Meguru just stared. He knew that this couldn't be helped since his stats were low, and to get stronger, you had to clear dungeons. But to get assigned to a dungeon, you had to already be strong. In short, it was a rigged game designed to keep losers in their place. He pressed on, saying any dungeon would do, but the girl just sighed, repeating the company line that he'd have to raise his rank first. Kana started to protest, pointing out that raising his rank would mean clearing dungeons solo, something that was basically a suicide mission for any normal F rank. Just then, the department head, the same guy who clocked Meguru's terrifying aura earlier, strolled over to see what the commotion was. The boss listened to the recap of their previous adventure, dismissed his employee's rudeness with a wave, and then turned his full, intense focus on Meguru and said, "Do you want to raise your rank? How about a special exam?" He explained that every month, hunters could test their skills in a special arena. Pass the test, and your rank goes up. There was no risk to life, and you could retake it if you failed. It sounded almost too good to be true. Still, it was a shortcut, and shortcuts were his specialty now. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. As Meguru walked away, the receptionist asked the boss why he even suggested, since no hunter had ever passed. The boss just kept smiling and said, "I have a feeling that he'll be the first." 3 days later, deep in the association's underground arena, the announcer explained the rules to the participant. The gist was simple. The monsters are fake, the pain is real, but even if you get your spine ripped out, you'll walk away fine. When the announcer asked for the first volunteer, a guy decked in a full suit of armor volunteered to go first. The huge doors swung open, and he marched in. On the monitors, the other examinees watched as a massive snake materialized. The guy charged in and swung his mighty sword, which connected with a dull thud. The snake didn't even flinch, it just looked offended. A moment later, the snake promptly uninstalled him from the arena. Seeing this, the other examinees collectively shat their pants as one of them muttered, "That thing is rank A, at least. How the hell are we supposed to beat that?" The announcer, unfazed, simply asked, "Who's next?" Meguru casually raised his hand. Inside the arena, our boy was now facing a huge white lion. Without wasting a second, the monster immediately started cooking up a fireball in its mouth while Outboy dodged it just in a nick of time. Just then the fireball scorched the spot where he'd been standing. The lion followed up with a paw swipe, but Meguru blocked it, the force sending him skidding back across the floor. That attack told him everything he needed to know. He thought to himself how he'd be done for if he were to even get scratched by it, but by then he had already come up with a plan. He lunged forward, not at the lion's head, but at its paw, scoring a deep gash. As the beast roared and started charging another fireball, Meguru saw his opening. He timed it perfectly, swinging his own magic-infused blade to slice through the stream of fire as he thought, "My casting speed is improving. I can move faster now." As the lion tried to charge up a third time, Meguru rushed it, using a burst of magic to launch himself into the air, right up to the monster's stupid, fiery face. He thought to himself how the jobless class is the jack of all trades, and all he had to do was to increase his stats to become stronger. With that thought, he shoved a condensed cloud of pure, violent magic straight down the lion's gullet, taking down the beast in one go. After the exam, a visibly trembling receptionist handed Meguru his new hunter card. He glanced at it, admiring his new class rank. Outside, Kana was practically vibrating with excitement as she said, "You actually did it. No one has ever passed that exam before. That's so cool. Man, she is so cute now. I'm mad at those guys for killing her." Meguru just pocketed his card and asked, "No one?" Kana thought for a moment and said, "That's what the association guy told me." Meanwhile, inside his office, the very same department head grinned. That's when the realization hit him. This was all a setup. Suddenly, 2 men who looked like they just walked off the set of Men in Black called out to them. "Are you Aisumi Meguru?" One of them asked. "You need to come with us." Kana, playing her part of a terrified little girl, asked Meguru if he knew them. Meguru hit her with "never seen them before in my life." He walked towards them as Kana started to panic. He reached into his pocket and pressed a small talisman, handing it to her. He told her not to worry about him and to go home, promising that he'll be back soon. Before she could protest, one of the suits grunted that it was time to leave. The vehicle entered a basement parking. The elevator dinged and his escort announced their arrival. They entered a ridiculously opulent room where an old man sat on a plush sofa. Not wasting any second, Meguru asked that old man directly why he had brought him. The old man let out a good-natured laugh as he said, "Forgive the theatrics. I simply want to offer you a good deal." He clicked open a briefcase on the table, revealing stacks of cash as he said, "I want to be your first sponsor." Meguru eyed the case, estimating it held at least 100 million yen. The old man explained that his agent had been watching the promotion exam and was thoroughly impressed. He offered a monthly salary of 100 million yen for Meguru's services, and honestly, for that kind of money, I'd sell my soul. Just kidding. When Meguru asked what he has to do, the old man, trying to dodge the topic, hit him with just various tasks, making it clear he wouldn't get a straight answer until he signed on the dotted line. Meguru thought to himself that the offer was tempting. The money could fund his war against the dungeon masters, but it came with golden handcuffs. He told the old guy that he appreciated the offer, but his freedom was not for sale, and politely rejected the offer as he turned to leave, only to find the door was now locked. One of the old man's agents stepped forward and said, "We can't allow you to leave." He moved with blinding speed, faster than any rancor Meguru had encountered so far, and slammed a fist into his gut. The force of the blow sent Meguru flying into the wall, a trickle of blood leaking from his mouth. He gasped for air, his lungs burning. Just then, the agent taunted him, asking if he was having trouble breathing, telling him that this room is sealed. The only ventilation is in the corridor outside. Flexing the ring on his finger, he said, "You won't have enough oxygen unless you have one of these." Meguru looked at the sparkling ring as he realized that they were using a magic item. Regardless, he pushed himself to his feet, wiping a smear of blood from his lip as he said, "Well, that was unexpected. But you've only slowed me down a little." With that, he launched himself at the agent who had just punched him. The goon smirked, winding up for another hit, but his smirk dissolved into a look of pure shock as Meguru's fist connected with his face first, sending him sprawling to the ground in a heap. The other agents stared in disbelief. They couldn't believe it as one of them whispered. He took him down in one hit that was their cue to collectively lose their shit and attack all at once. One of them even pulled a knife that was glistening with poison. Meguru just stood there, watching the poison knife guy charge at him in what felt like slow motion as he kicked the knife out of the man's hand with a flick of his foot, breaking the dumbass's fingers in the process. He thought to himself, "If my sense has been slowed down, then I'll just have to act according to that." It didn't take him long to dismantle the rest of the charging goons. In seconds, only one agent was left standing. While slowly taking off his tie and then his shirt, he said, "You're good, but you're no match for me." He ripped a battle axe off the wall and charged, letting out a roar. Meguru dodged the wild swings as a thought popped in his mind. This guy was a berserker, a class that was all about brute strength and terrifying power, but not a single useful thought behind those eyes. He remembered fighting a berserker once in his past life. He knew that they were strong, but they had a glaring, fatal weakness. They were utter trash against magic. With his versatile skill set, the final swift movement, he appeared right above the rampaging meathead. This class is weak to magic, he thought as he unleashed a concentrated blast of pure energy. The berserker looked up in surprise just as the magic pierced his body, his eyes rolling back as he crashed to the floor. Just then, the old man, who had been watching the entire one-sided slaughter with an unnerving calm, began to clap slowly and said, "As expected from the hunter that had piqued my interest," and he was about to spew some more nonsense when Meguru slammed his fist on the locked door and told him to open the door or else. The old man just chuckled and pulled out his phone saying, "Don't be in such a rush. Even someone as strong as you has weaknesses." He turned the screen towards Meguru and the world stopped. It was a live feed of Kana tied up and gagged in her own room. Seeing this, a new kind of horror washed over him as he said, "You bastard, have you been following her all this time?" The old man just shrugged and said, "I decided to have my subordinates follow her, just in case. She seems very dear to you. I wonder what might happen to her if you continue refusing my very generous proposal." On the screen, Kana's terrified voice begged for Meguru to save her. He called her name. That's when one of the goons ripped the gag from her mouth, and she began begging for help again. Reaching for Kana, he said to others, "Remember, the boss said we could do whatever we want, so we're going to enjoy ourselves." But just as his briny fingers were about to touch her, Kana screamed, "Stop," sending the men flying back. They stared in disbelief, completely stunned by her sudden power. Kana looked down at the now severed ropes, equally confused, just as a small charm fell from her pocket. She picked it up, remembering the moment Meguru had given it to her. She figured out that magnificent, paranoid bastard had saved her. Meanwhile, back in the underground panic room, the shit was about to go down. Out boy Meguru no longer had to hold back. He walked up to this old man and, looking directly in his eyes, said, "Did you really think that I wouldn't plan for something like this?" He explained that the amulet was a little trinket he made to protect Kana that he could activate remotely, with the activation condition being Kana is in immediate danger. Not wanting to deal with his bullshit anymore, he said, "I suggest you open the door." Knowing full well that the tables has been turned, old man's he fumbled for a remote, and with a click, the heavy doors slid open. Just as Meguru was about to leave, he paused, turning to the old man. He said, "I have one more question. Why did you choose me?" He couldn't understand why he would pick on a hunter who was clearly struggling to make an honest living. The old man told him that he needed strong hunters, that he was collecting them for someone else. Seeing that he was holding back some info, he pressed his blade to the old man's wrinkled throat as he demanded him to give him a name. The old man looked at the blade, his eyes wide with terror as he told him the man's name. Meguru continued with his questions as he asked, "Why does he need them?" The old man swore he knew nothing else. Meguru held his gaze for a long, silent moment as he said, "I believe you," before flicking his wrist and leaving a shallow, bloody cut across the old man's cheek. "If you or any of your people ever come near me or Kana again, I will end you." With that, he turned and left. Later, he burst through his apartment door, his heart pounding in his chest as he yelled out Kana's name, asking her if she was okay. The second she heard his voice, Kana threw herself at him, clinging to him as he asked her if she was hurt somewhere. "Are you hurt?" She just shook her head, crying as she held up the charred remnants of the amulet. Meguru apologized for leaving her alone as he said softly, "You did good." She sat on the edge of the bed, the adrenaline finally wearing off, and she asked if they were going to call the police. Meguru shook his head and told her that Miyoshi Matsubara is involved in this, so the police won't be able to do jack shit against a monster like that. At the mention of the name, Kana shot up from the bed and asked, "Matsubara, one of the 6 heroes?" Meguru just nodded as he told her to pack her things. Kana blinked, confused, as she said, "Pack my things." He confirmed it with a nod and said, "It's not safe for you to live alone anymore. You're moving." Before she could even process it, he was already grabbing a box and starting to pack her belongings. Kana finally found her voice and asked him, "Wait, where am I moving to?" He turned around and told her, "Until you find a new place, I figured you'd live with me." Kana's face exploded into 50 shades of red and started shaking her head, asking him if he don't see a problem with that. But this blockhead just turned to her and asked, "What's the problem?" Looking genuinely confused before nonchalantly adding, "I've got a double bed." Kana repeated herself, asking, "And you don't see any problem with that?" He just tilted his head and hit her with a nope as he said, "I care about you a lot." At this moment, Kana's brain short-circuited. Seeing her struggle, he added, "Isn't it normal for families to live together?" The word family seemed to soothe her panic, and she finally gave in, saying, "If it's with you, then it's fine," while mentally applying for Alabama citizenship. Meanwhile, in a scene straight out of a villain's handbook, Miyoshi strolled into the old man's now demolished basement. Seeing the mess, he asked, "What the hell happened here?" The old man, who looked like he could die at any moment, greeted him and admitted he failed to recruit the hunter. Miyoshi grabbed him by the hair, yanking his head back, and asked him who did it to him. The old man quickly handed over a phone number, explaining that the hunter's name was Asumi Meguru, an unknown hunter with a jobless class but with terrifying strength. The name made Miyoshi pause. Asumi Meguru, jobless but strong? A flicker of a memory, a face from a century ago, flashed in his mind. It can't be, he thought. He threw a phone the picture of Meguru at the old man and ordered him to find out everything about him. He wanted to know every single detail and even gave him permission to use any method necessary. Later, Kana woke up still not able to wrap her head around the fact that she was in the same bed as Meguru. She stretched before her eyes landed on his sleeping face. A blush crept up her cheeks, and after a moment of internal debate, she gave in to the impulse and poked his cheek with her finger. Later, fully dressed and ready to make her escape, she stopped dead at the apartment door because a shimmering, swirling portal had just appeared out of thin air. She yelled out for Meguru. He emerged from the bedroom, looked at the shimmering portal, and went, "Well, that's new. Don't usually see dungeons popping up in residential hallways." He sized it up, noting it was probably a C rank. He told Kana he'd be right back, but grabbed him from behind, refusing to let go, saying if he was going into that weird apartment-eating void, she was going with him. Inside, after dispatching a few low-level mobs, Meguru noted that this part of the dungeon was a bust. Kana, who was following behind him, thinking to herself, was she even useful here? She felt more like a very anxious backpack. As if reading her mind, Meguru turned to her and said, "Hey, can you use Abyss?" Kana stared at him blankly. Abyss? The legendary stat-lowering spell? The one from fairy tales? She thought to herself how ridiculous the thought was, because the only known person who could use it was the legendary hero Kana, while she was just a simple cleric. But Meguru was confident that even with her memories gone, that power was still buried in her soul somewhere. Just then, a monstrous dog charged at them. Meguru, without missing a beat, turned and cast a weaker version of Abyss and sent the beast flying with a kick, while Kana just stood there thinking, what the actual heck just happened here? Turning to her, he explained that just now was a watered-down version of Abyss, adding it's the one perk of being in the jobless class. He can do a little bit of everything. Kana's eyes widened as she exclaimed, "That's incredible. I never knew the jobless class was so cool." Turning her attention to the topic, he told her that was nothing and she could do a much better job than him because the technique was practically carved into her soul. All she had to do was believe in herself and picture the result. Basically power of friendship kind of shit. After a bit more convincing, she finally agreed to try. As she closed her eyes, her hands crackling with nascent energy, Meguru watched, a thought forming in his mind. Maybe the key wasn't to recreate one massive, complex spell from memory. Maybe, just maybe, she could achieve the same effect by layering simpler spells, one on top of the other. Just as Meguru pointed out the new wave monsters, Kana closed her eyes, took a breath, and cast the legendary Abyss spell, binding them in their tracks. She stared at her own hands, her mind completely blown as she muttered, "I actually did it." Meguru just put a hand on her shoulder, and with a proud, shit-eating grin on his face, he said, "Didn't I tell you?" He then added, "Now that you've mastered the debuff, I'll teach you force and adjustment." Kana looked at him as if he'd just suggested they juggle live grenades. Sometime later, they were already at the boss's chamber, and it didn't take long for shit to hit the fan. As the boss charged, Kana's mind raced, remembering the crash course Meguru had given her on the way. She extended her hand, channeling her mana, and cast Force, which was the opposite of Abyss, a spell that didn't weaken enemies but buffed allies instead. As if on cue, Meguru zipped between the beast's legs with suicidal confidence, slapped a magical seal on the ground, and a pillar of flame erupted, instantly turning the monster into a pile of ash. Seeing him take down the beast, Kana thought to herself, "Now I can be a help to him." Meguru walked over to her, thanking her for the help before adding, "I'm surprised at how easy that was. You're amazing." Kana's face went crimson and she started stammering that it was nothing, really. But Meguru's smile faded as he checked his stats. Something was wrong. The dungeon was cleared, but his XP bar hadn't budged. There was no reward, no satisfying ding of a level up. That's when a new portal shimmered into existence in front of them, this one looking far less inviting and a lot more like a one-way ticket to hell. "That doesn't look like an exit, does it?" Kana asked. Meguru's face was grim because he had realized exactly what it was. "It's a double dungeon." He explained it in a clipped, urgent tone. A rare, fucked-up phenomenon where a second, much harder dungeon was hidden inside the first. Seeing the mana the portal was emitting, he judged that it would at least be a B-rank dungeon. As she heard the word B-rank, Kana's expression fell. She knew that this dumbass would want to conquer it. Trying to be the voice of reason, she reminded him that that's like a natural disaster, reminding him that it was too dangerous, even for him, and urging him to go back, but he wasn't having it. He didn't want to leave, especially after coming this far. Turning to her, he said, "With your buffs, I should be able to handle it." He started walking towards the portal of doom, and Kana called out his name in a desperate, terrified cry. But her voice was drowned out by a deafening crack. The entire ceiling of the cave began to fracture. Meguru's eyes widened in horror, and he spun around and ran towards Kana, but he was too slow, too far away. Massive stones rained down from above, and Kana could only look at him before the world went black and she was buried under a mountain of rock and rubble. Meguru turns around and sees the whole damn ceiling has collapsed right where Kana was standing. He absolutely loses his shit, starts screaming her name and claws at the rocks. Maybe a picture of her turning into a pancake would be floating in his mind right about now. But then, Kana just crawls out of the rubble, dusts herself off, and is like, "I'm good." There was barely a scratch on her. She tells him it's all thanks to the spells he taught her, and then, out of nowhere, gives him this huge hug. Meguru gets all stiff and awkward before pushing her away. He tries to play it cool by saying the collapse felt like magic, like someone else was there. Well, no shit. Sherlock, you're in a dungeon. After that, they started heading deeper into the dungeon. As he cleared the first wave of mobs, he thought to himself, the enemies in this part of the dungeon are way tougher, while mentally patting himself for teaching Kana all those spells beforehand, thinking how if he keeps this up, he'll be ready for his revenge in no time. Seeing him grinning like an idiot, Kana asks him what's up, and he fumbles through some bullshit excuse about wanting a reward for clearing the dungeon. They finally get to the boss room, and it's a giant three-headed dog. Meguru yells at Kana to do her thing, and she hits the beast with a spell. Then he rushes in, dodges the beast's paw, and starts climbing the monster. The dog smacks him, reminding him this is a B-rank boss. His first genius plan is to throw a dagger at its throat. The dog literally just ducks its head, and the dagger shatters on its teeth. Realizing he needs to stop being a dumbass, Meguru decides to actually try. Since he's a jobless person who can use all the elements, he starts mixing wind and earth magic to create plasma around his blade. With his eyes glowing, he dodges one last attack and then zips forward, slicing all three of the dog's heads off in one clean shot. Blood goes everywhere, the giant body thumps to the ground, and a notification pops up saying the dungeon's cleared, hitting Meguru with that sweet, sweet stat boost. Just when he was admiring his new improved stats, a shiny golden ticket just popped into his hand. The system chimes in, explaining it's some kind of special daily cleanup ticket that lets him redo dungeons for leveling up. Meguru just stares at it, completely baffled, like, what the hell is this thing anyway? Just then, Kana runs up to him all worried, asking if he's okay. Meguru, trying to act tough, touches the wound on his cheek and brushes it off, saying it's just a scratch. He pockets the weird ticket, and they both dip out through the portal, completely unaware of the fact that some shady guy was watching him the entire time. This dude immediately bails and reports back to Miyoshi. who's puffing on a cigar. The spy tells them that this Meguru is the real deal, saying he cleared a whole double dungeon without even breaking a sweat. Miyoshi just smirks, all smug about it. The spy keeps going. He says there's no way a normal jobless dude could pull this off. Meguru has skills and experience that make zero sense for a kid his age, adding that he is sure to become a top ranker for sure. Before adding, it has a very weak point. The fatal flaw is so massive that if they use it against him, he'll be less of a problem than a bottom-of-the-barrel E-rank hunter. Miyoshi just chuckles, knowing he's got him, and tells the old man to pay up. The old dude opens the same suitcase that I was ready to sell my soul for, stuffed with cash, calling it a reward plus an advance for the next job. Sato looks at the money and straight up asks, "You want me to kill him?" The old man smiles and asks if that's a problem for him, calling him by name and reminding him that he's an A-rank hero. To seal the deal, Miyoshi hands Sato a sick-looking sword with a raven mark on it. Sato just sighs and says, "Well, this can't be helped," basically agreeing to murder our boy. Meanwhile, Meguru and Kana are back home, completely spent by their dungeon run. Kana is passed out in the bed while our boy is staring at the golden ticket. Knowing that it'll just freak her out, he decides not to tell her about it yet. Though his curiosity gets the better of him, and he is thinking a C-rank dungeon will be a walk in the park now that he himself is a C-rank, so he decides to use it. He pushes some mana into the ticket and vanishes from the apartment in a flash. He reappears on some tropical-themed island with a massive tree in the middle, a place he's never seen before. He looks around and it dawns on him that there's no exit. He's stuck here until he kills the boss. As if on cue, a system window pops up saying he's completed one of 100 daily tasks. Before he can even process what that means, he hears a rustle behind him. He spins around and freezes, his eyes going wide when he sees a literal army of monsters staring him down. All he can think is, well, this is going to be tiresome. As he starts his little monster massacre, a little progress bar for his daily task pops up, and it just keeps filling up for every monster he kills. After killing the last monster, he catches his breath and thinks, all right, done. Now what? Just then, the ground starts cracking open right under his feet. He jumps back just in time to see a crab the size of a car crawl out of the sand. Meguru immediately clocks it as the boss, but he also notices that it was only a C rank, which wasn't a problem for him now that he too was a C rank hunter. Without wasting any time, he points his hand at the overgrown seafood platter and just lets loose with a blast of fire magic. The whole thing goes up in a massive explosion, raining down bits of cooked crab meat from the sky. A system window pops up with his reward, a fragment of a ticket for daily cleansing and a full heal potion. Meguru instantly realizes the reward for this dungeon isn't like the normal ones. He accepts it anyway, and the potion materializes in his hand. Then he looks down and sees his hands are turning see-through. Then he just stands there watching himself fade out until he completely disappears. He reappears back in his apartment, and the first thing he does is check on Kana, who is still dead asleep. Then he looks at the golden ticket in his hand and realizes that it hadn't disappeared. A while later, he and Kana are walking up to the Hunters Association when some random dude tells his friend to look at our boy. They both just start staring at him. Meguru, who has the social grace of a brick, marches right up to them and asks, "Do I have something on my face?" The guys freak out, waving their hands and saying it's nothing before bolting into the building. Kana has to gently remind him, "Dude, you're the jobless guy who somehow passed the promotion exam. You're basically a celebrity now, you idiot." Before she could finish, some worker from the Hunters Association called out to him, saying they've received a special assignment just for him and Kana. Meguru takes the paper and is immediately confused, like, who the hell is Sato, and why would he especially request for us? Are you sure you got the right guy? The girl just smiles and says that Sato probably just took notice of him after the exam. Meguru just smiles and says he'll take the job. A little later, he heads to the meeting spot and finds Sato waiting with two other dudes. Sato greets him with a grin and says, "So you're that crazy strong, jobless guy." Meguru shakes his hand, thinking to himself, "So that's my title now, I guess." The other two guys basically announce they're just useless meat shields here to fill the party quota, telling Meguru they're counting on him. They all head into the dungeon and the whole squad gets ready for a fight with a crystal lizard. But before anyone can even blink, Sato flashes forward with his new sword and one-shots the monster into a million shiny pieces. Meguru is genuinely surprised by his power, thinking that a rank really is no joke after all. It was the second strongest rank in the world. Not to be outdone, when a pack of monsters tries to jump him from behind, Meguru just casually roasts them all with a wave of fire magic. Sato just grins, saying the rumors were true and that seeing it in person is something else. Then they suggest that since Meguru is so strong, maybe he should just clear the dungeon by himself while they will be on loot retrieval duty. At this point, any guy with 2 functioning brain cells can guess that this guy is shady as hell, but apparently not Meguru. He just thinks, I don't get what this guy's deal is, but hey, free EXP bonus for me. So he agrees and proceeds to single-handedly slaughter his way to the boss's room. Once they arrive, Meguru finally decides to use his brain and asks Sato, "Hey, why did you really invite me here?" Sato, who has been waiting for this moment, puts his hand on the hilt of his sword and says with a chilling smile, "Oh, I never told you, did I? Before Meguru can even process the massive red flag he just missed, Sato attacks. The speed of the strike was so insane that all Meguru could think was he is fast as he barely dodges the strike. Sato swings his sword again and says, "I invited you here so I could do this." As his sword flashes in front of Meguru's face, he barely yanks himself out of the way of the killing blow. Sato clicks his tongue, clearly pissed off. One of the useless meat shields from the squad, finally finding his voice, stammers out, "What are you doing?" Sato, without even looking at him, just says, "You're annoying," and in one fluid motion, slashes the guy's leg open. He then turns and does the same to the girl, taking them both out of the fight instantly. Meguru can only stare in shock as he thinks to himself, "What the hell is going on here?" He glances at the wounded party members, realizing he can't worry about them now. Turning to Sato, he thinks to himself, "I have to kill him right now." He yells for Kana to get the hell out of there, and she thankfully doesn't argue, just nods and runs. Alone with the assassin, Meguru thinks that he's never had a real serious duel before, but with the path of revenge he's on, it was bound to happen sooner or later. He charges forward, unleashing a massive torrent of magic straight at Sato, only to watch in horror as the bastard stands there completely unharmed. Sato calmly pulls out a lighter, sparks up a cigarette, and says, "It's not like I hate you or anything. I'm just doing this because Matsubara asked me to," and then he lunges forward, telling Meguru not to take it personally. They trade blows, and Meguru, while parrying, yells Matsubara. Sato just keeps attacking, sneering that the guy is interested in him for some reason, especially in how he got so damn powerful. He follows that up with a brutal knee to the gut that sends Meguru flying into a wall. The pain is blinding, and as Meguru coughs up blood, it finally clicks. So that's what this was all about. He made me clear the whole damn dungeon to tire me out. He struggles to his feet, telling himself he can't lose. If he dies here, Kana's next. The thought sends a jolt through him, and his pupils constrict. He goes absolutely ballistic, moving with a speed that catches Sato completely off guard. Before the A-rank hero can even react, Meguro is behind him, pummeling him with a furious barrage of punches that sends him crashing into the opposite wall. Sato, struggling to get up, can't believe it. How did he suddenly get so much stronger? But a nasty smile spreads across his face. "Unfortunately for you, I have an ace up my sleeve." He spots Kana, grabs her, and puts his sword to her neck. "This is your weak point, right? If you don't want her to die, you know what to do." Meguru freezes. He knows Sato would kill her before he could get there. Sato starts kicking the shit out of a helpless Meguru who can only think, "If only I wasn't so tired." Then a light bulb goes off in his battered brain, and he remembers the potion he got for clearing the dungeon. Gulping down the potion, he thinks to himself, "All I can do right now is bet on it." As Sato raises his sword for the final blow, yelling "Die," Meguru chugs the full restoration potion as he does. Power floods his system, and he quickly and effortlessly disarms Sato, sending his sword flying with one swift kick. Seeing him move, he mutters, "Why are you still on your feet?" But our boy wasn't interested in small talk. He just saw him appear behind him in a flash and went, "You shouldn't have underestimated me," before thrusting his hand forward and blasting a hole straight through Sato's head with magic. After catching his breath, he sees Kana treating the other two hunters. He asks her if they are still breathing. Kana nods before adding, "But we'll have to take them to the hospital right now." Meguru thinks to himself if he should go back or clear the dungeon first. He takes Seiko's sword and decides clearing the dungeon is faster than leaving. He walks into the boss room, sees a giant lizard, and says, "Sorry, no time for games." He one-shots the monster in a shower of blood. A bright flash fills the room, and a system window announces all his stats have increased by a hopping 50 points. He's shocked, wondering what just happened, when another notification pops up informing him that he has acquired the Crest of Duty. He looks down at his hand and sees a strange new mark on his palm. He gives it a hard look before thinking to himself, "What the hell is this?" After thinking it over, Meguru decides the smart play is to just keep his mouth shut about the whole attempted murder thing. He gets the two wounded meat shields to go along with his story, making sure they all have the same alibi. Then he heads back to the association and lays it on thick for the desk worker. She buys it, but then starts going on and on about how Sato was this legendary hunter, a total prodigy who even won the Dragon Lord Festival. Meguru, who literally just left the guy's corpse in a dungeon, starts getting pissed off and asks her, "What are you trying to imply?" The girl gets spooked and backtracks, suggesting that maybe one of the other party members found a chance to stab him in the back. Meguru just stares at her, tapping his finger on the table in pure irritation before saying, "And what motive would we have? You really think any of us could do it?" The girl immediately bows and apologizes, realizing how dumb that sounds. Meguru, picturing the hole he blasted through Sato's head, just purses his lips and says, "I'm tired," before turning to leave. He walks right past Kana and tells her they're going. On the way home, Kana asks him why they couldn't just tell the association what really happened. He feeds her some half-assed excuse about how telling the truth would bring in the police and make everything a huge mess. He even swears that's the only reason, but of course, that's a complete load of horseshit. His internal monologue is a different story entirely. It was Sato's fault for trying to kill him, so he got what he deserved. Plus, with the dungeon gone, there's no evidence anyway. The real reason he's lying is that he doesn't want any more goddamn attention. He already put a massive target on his back just by passing the promotion exam, which is how Matsubara noticed him in the first place. He knows he can't afford any more trouble right now. He has to focus on his revenge. But right in the middle of his big brain scheming, a sharp lance goes through his head, making him break out in a cold sweat. Kana asks if he's okay, and he just plays it off as being dizzy. Later, they get home and Meguru crashes. He's just lying in bed. He wonders if this is what it feels like to take a human life. He never killed anyone before and never imagined it would feel so disgusting. The price of murder was way heavier than he thought, but as the sick feeling churns in his stomach, he knows he has to swallow it down. He has to deal with those six lords, and this is just the beginning. Just as Meguru was about to spiral down his new emo rabbit hole, Kama's voice snapped him out of it. He looked up at her and saw she was holding a plate of food. With a look of pure pity, she told him he needed to eat something or he wouldn't be able to take his medicine. Meguru let out a heavy sigh, thanked her for the effort, and took a bite, and he thought to himself, holy shit, it's actually delicious. He felt a wave of strength return to his body and even thought he felt a little bit healed. It hit him then. Kana, being a natural-born hero-level healer, probably just subconsciously laced his porridge with healing magic without even realizing it. The girl was a god in cheat code. She sat down next to him and, getting straight to the point, asked if killing Sato was bothering him. After a moment of silence, she took his hand and said, "You were just protecting us. It wasn't your fault. Don't worry about it, okay?" Meguru managed a weak smile, admitting he made her worry, and thanked her. She just said everything was fine, but then her eyes locked onto his hand. "Since when did you have a mark like that?" Meguru glanced down at the symbol, playing dumb and saying it just appeared out of nowhere. But as he looked closer, he realized it actually seemed a little bit dimmer than the last time he saw it. Meanwhile, across town, Miyoshi was having a full-blown villain meltdown. Lounging on his fancy sofa, he yelled, "I never thought Sato would actually die." The guy was extra pissed because he was his right-hand man, his key to building a power base in Japan before any other heroes could. In a fit of pure rage, he squeezed the glass in his hand until it shattered, thinking to himself, Sato was supposed to be the most reliable and strongest guy he could hire, and some snot-nosed kid named Esumi Meguru just smoked him. Who the hell is this Meguru guy? He slammed his fist on the table for good measure, his mind racing as he came to a conclusion that he no longer gave a shit who or what Meguru was. If he left him alive, he would definitely become a threat. Plus, there was also the chance that Sato, before getting his head popped, might have snitched about who sent him. Staring out the window at the city lights, he thought before this situation got any more out of control, he had to kill the kid himself, just like he killed that other guy 100 years ago. The next morning, Meguru wakes up, takes a look at his hand, and the freaky symbol is no longer there. Just then, Kana woke up next to him and asked how he was feeling. He puts on a smile and says he's all good now, but his mind is already spinning. He's thinking that Kana still isn't experienced enough to defend herself and his genius solution. Not rest, not recovery, but dragging Kana right back into another dungeon to train her. He grabs the golden ticket, then grabs her hand and tells her they need to go somewhere for a minute. She immediately blushes, probably thinking he's finally making a move or some shit, but then he just grins like an idiot and invites her to go to a dungeon. The look on her face was priceless as she said, "Are you crazy? You can't fight." Meguru just keeps smiling and replies that everything will be fine. After all, I'm not the one who will fight, you are. Before she can even protest that level of absolute disrespect, they both disappear and end up back on Murder Island. They run around the island for some time, fighting monsters and running away from them, and after some time, the system finally dings, informing Meguru that he had completed the daily mission. This time, the reward is a B-rank dungeon ticket fragment and a death prevention charm, which is basically a one-time get-out-of-death-free card. Meguru just thinks, interesting, knowing damn well it'll come in handy later. Afterwards, they head to the Hunters Association, but as soon as they walk in, the boss calls out to Meguru asking for a word. He agrees and they head to the reception area. The boss sits him down and doesn't waste a single second. He just looks Meguru dead in the eye and says, "Let's get straight to the point. You killed the A-rank hunter, Sato, didn't you?" Meguru tries to play dumb, asking why he'd think that. The chief just scoffs, explaining that there's no way the monsters in that dungeon could have killed a hunter of Sato's caliber. He mentions all the dark rumors surrounding the guy and says he doesn't think Meguru set him up. He assumes Sato struck first. Besides, the chief adds, "You're strong. I can feel it. You have a talent that goes beyond the whole ranking system." Meguru just sighs, trying to lean on his old excuse. "You've got to be kidding me. I'm jobless. That's the weakest class there is, right?" But the chief isn't buying his bullshit. He just leans back and drops a goddamn history lesson on him, talking about some legendary jobless hero from 100 years ago. He suggests that another absurdly strong jobless person showing up wouldn't be that strange. The chief just smiles and says he doesn't actually care whether he killed Sato or not. "But if you were strong enough to do it, then I have a request for you." The chief finishes, and just like that, Meguru gets roped into some high-level bullshit. The request turns out to be a trip to the Shibuya Hunters Association to help them clear an A-rank dungeon. Our boy thought to himself, A rank is the highest level there is, so it was natural that the local association already gathered their best people, but just to be extra careful, they called in reinforcements. Kana, hearing this, freaks out a little. Looking at the crowd of hunters around her, she said, it takes that many people to clear an A-rank dungeon, while Meguru just smiles and assures her that he's sure everything will be fine. They walk up to the group they're supposed to be joining, and Meguru apologizes for being late. The girl with the pink hair immediately asks if they are the reinforcements. Meguru nods and she just scoffs, saying the Hunter Association is interfering too much and that they could have cleared the dungeon themselves. Seeing this, her friend tries to tell her not to be such a bitch, but Nozomi just sighs and tells Meguru and Kana to stay out of her way. Then she asks, what are your hunter ranks and classes? Kana says she's a D-rank healer, which gets a nod. Then Nozomi looks at Meguru and asks, what about him? He just replies, oh, I'm a D-rank jobless. Well, that sure gets a reaction out of her. Meguru tries to smooth things over, saying, I know what this looks like, but don't worry. We're confident in our abilities. That was the wrong thing to say. Nozomi just covers her face with her hand, muttering that a jobless D-rank is obviously useless, no matter how much experience he has. She grabs Meguru by his collar and gets right in his face. You're looking down on this dungeon, you're going to die, you know that, right? Hikari yells at her that she's going too far, and Nozomi finally lets go. Kana rushes over to see if Meguru's okay, and he just confirms he's fine. But Nozomi is still glaring at him with pure hatred, thinking that his overconfidence is going to get everyone killed. Without another word, she turns and storms through the portal into the dungeon. Her friends scramble to follow her, and Meguru just watches them go, thinking to himself, looks like a storm's coming. Well, no shit, bro, you're a walking disaster magnet. As they're walking into the dungeon, Meguru notices that Nozomi's words got into Kana's head. Meguru takes her hand and asks if she's ready. When she hesitates, he gives her a head pat and says, you're strong enough. I guarantee it. Who do you trust more, me or them? Which somehow works, and she blushes and agrees. They step inside and are immediately greeted by a massive minotaur. Nozomi orders Sakura to take care of the monster, who just grins and says, leave it to me. She charges in and smashes the monster with her axe, knocking it off balance. Hikari follows up with a massive fire spell, and Nozomi finishes the job with a clean sword strike, making the beast cough up blood before it crashes to the ground. They all agree that a rank is a whole different level, and Nozomi, thoroughly content with their performance, says they just need to keep up the formation. That's when she spots Meguru and Kana as she thinks to herself, did they decide to come in anyway? Even after I had warned them. Knowing that there were still monsters around, she told the group to stop. But as she's talking, another minotaur breaks off and charges straight for Meguru. She rushed in to help them, but then Kana throws a buff on Meguru and he casually kicks the minotaur's charging axe aside. He follows it up by drawing his sword and slicing the minotaur's head clean off its shoulders. Seeing this, the hunters in the back who were watching went crazy as they started talking about how awesome our boy was, adding that this was what they had expected from the reinforcements. But Meguru didn't care about it at all. He thought to himself, I didn't want to stand out, but I suppose it can't be helped. Seeing this, Nozomi's jaw hits the floor as he mutters, what the hell just happened here? While she's having her little mental breakdown, two more minotaurs sneak up behind her. Before she can even turn around, Meguru just points his hand and throws fireballs at the monster, and in an instant, two monsters scream in pain and fall to the ground. He walks over, extends a hand, and asks if she's okay. She just nods, and Kana lets out a sigh of relief. The pink-haired girl immediately starts blushing up a storm and apologizes for being rude earlier, admitting she judged them unfairly. Meguru just says he doesn't care and that her trying to keep them safe was an act of kindness. This makes her blush even harder as she mutters, it's been ages since someone has praised me. Meguru just turns and says they should work together from now on. Fast forward 2 hours of non-stop monster slaughter, and the A-rank squad is starting to realize something's weird. They've been fighting for ages but are no closer to the boss room. Nozomi, who is now completely sold on Team Meguru after seeing Kana's insane buffs, thinks out loud about how strange it is since it was her first A-rank raid. She wonders if this was normal or if they have really been going in circles. Meguru, pointing to the marks he had left behind, said, no, there's really something strange going on here, confirming that they really had been going in circles. Nozomi ponders for a moment before saying, but there weren't any branches in the path. Meguru walks up to a wall, saying that he just might know what was going on here. He told the group that he has something in mind he wanted to try and then released a blast of energy that shattered the wall, revealing a hidden path behind it. Nozomi turned to him and asked him how he figured it out while no one can now. He can't exactly tell them that he got screwed over by this exact same gimmick in his past life, so instead he bullshits his way through it, saying that he had read about it a long time ago, while in reality he had used a secret technique called searching, where he accelerates his mana to detect hollow spots in the walls. Kana and the others somehow buy this. After a bit of walking, they reach the boss's chamber. Nozomi told the group about her plan, so the plan basically was that she'll lead the vanguard and tank the boss. Meguru and Sakura will be the main attackers, and Hikari will hang back to provide support and protect Kana. Everyone nodded in agreement, but Meguru knew better. He thought to himself that boss is going to be way stronger than they think. But since he doesn't have a better idea and doesn't feel like arguing with the pink-haired menace, he just agrees. They step into the room and are greeted by a minotaur. The damn thing was huge and was striking an awkward pose while holding an axe that is bigger than my student debt. Before anyone can even move, the boss attacks. Meguru immediately dodges, feeling the raw power behind the swing and knows this thing is on a whole other level. But Nozomi immediately charges forward, swinging her sword, but before he could tell her, it was already too late. The boss swings its massive axe down and Nozomi tries to block it with her shield. The shield couldn't handle the blow, and the force of the blow sends Nozomi flying across the room until she crashes into a wall. Everyone just stares in complete shock as they thought, this can't be happening. Nozomi's defense was supposed to be unbreakable. Meguru just sighs, thinking to himself how for a knight's defense it was good, but in the end, it was a tank's job, so of course she can't handle the raw power of an A-rank boss. He immediately takes command, telling everyone what they must do. As he turned to face the boss, it let out a loud roar and threw its weapon. Meguru barely dodges, his heart pounding. He knew that any one of his attacks could kill him instantly, and as if things weren't bad enough, the monster just grows a new axe out of thin air. The thing is as bad as things could get, and he knew that he'd have to try very hard to beat this thing. Thinking to himself that if he can just get one opening, even for a single moment, but that thought is cut short as the boss swings his brand new weapon, aiming directly at him. Seeing his opening, Meguru acted quickly. He slams his hand on the ground, channeling his magic into the earth. A forest of massive, sharp magical crystals erupts from the floor, slamming into the Minotaur's leg and stopping its attack dead in its tracks. The big guy roars in pain and stumbles back, and that's when Meguru's brain finally clicks. He had figured out that the boss had a high attack stat, but not the meaning it was lacking in defense. So with that new understanding, he bolts towards the monster, which swings its axe in a wide arc. Meguru leaps, dodges the blow, and lands perfectly on the flat of the axe. He sprints up to the weapon, straight for the boss's face. His whole plan was based on the charm that he had earned earlier. He jumps into the air, yelling how it'll be his last blow before slicing a deep gash across the Minotaur's chest. Blood gushes out everywhere, and Meguru lands on the floor, breathing heavily. He's feeling pretty damn good about himself, thinking that was close, but is mostly just glad he pulled it off. But his victory party is cut short when he looks up and sees that the Minotaur is still standing, its eyes glowing with a terrifying bright red light. It had gone full berserker mode. The boss roars and smashes its axe into the ground, unleashing a massive shockwave. Meguru knows that he won't be able to take another direct hit. He thinks maybe he can wear it down, play a battle of attrition. But before he can even finish his genius plan, the boss hurls its axe straight at him. He barely dodges it, but then the bastard throws another one right after Meguru was taken by surprise as he wondered so it can still do combo attacks. There's no time to dodge the second one. He just stares in absolute horror as the giant axe fills his entire vision, with his last thoughts being, "Am I really going to die in a place like this?" Just as the axe is about to slice our boy in two, Kana comes flying in from out of nowhere and stands right in front of him, shielding him with her body. He yells out to Kana, "What the hell are you doing?" But she just turns and gives him a weak smile. And in that moment, the axe hits, and there's a massive explosion of magical energy that shakes the entire room. When the smoke clears, they're both still standing there, Kana holding the death prevention charm in her hand. Seeing his chance, Meguru pours all his magical energy into his sword and charges at the monster, thinking he can't possibly miss this opportunity. The boss, meanwhile, just roars and summons another weapon, but Meguru doesn't pay any attention to it and goes on to create a storm of magical crystals and sends them flying at the Minotaur before leaping into the air, his sword glowing with pure power. He grips the hilt with everything he has and brings it down in one final desperate strike, slicing the monster clean in half. He lands behind the bisected boss, his own energy flaring around him as a teleporter appears in the middle of the room. Meguru collapses to the floor, panting and muttering to himself. I seriously thought I was going to die just then. The system windows popped up all around him, and he just sighed as expected from an A-rank dungeon. All his stats have increased by 30 points, but what caught his eye was the extra 50 that he got from the Crest of Duty. The other hunters who saw the whole thing are just staring at him, wondering who the hell this guy is. He is all embarrassed and calls out to Kana, who is already treating the wounded Nozomi. He thanks her, admitting he would have lost if it weren't for her, and gives her another one of his signature awkward head pats, which she of course loves. He then adds, but seriously, he'll never do that again. My heart can't take it. Kana just fires back that he's the one who's always putting himself in danger. Just then, Nozomi walks up to him, looking at him with a completely different expression as she says, "Honestly, I'm surprised you managed to defeat an A-rank boss. Are you really a jobless D-rank?" Meguru just agrees, saying that now the Hunter Association should at least recognize him as a C-rank. Nozomi looks at his card and says, "You're very strong," but then adds that it's weird he has trouble getting requests. It usually takes no time at all. Then, completely out of the blue, she grabs his hand and looks up at him with big, sparkly eyes. She launches into this whole sales pitch about him and Kana joining her guild. She talks about how it's a shame for a strong guy like him to not be in a guild, how they could get higher ranked jobs immediately, and how her guild doesn't even take a cut of the reward money. But then she drops the real reason, getting all blushy and saying, "This is because I'd feel much safer if you were in my guild. I'd like to work with you." Meguru, being the dense idiot that he is, isn't picking up on any of this. He just thanks her for the offer, but says they have no plans to join any groups, no matter how good the deal is. He's thinking that joining a guild would tie him down, and he can't have that. Nozomi, seeing she's getting nowhere, changes tactics and says, "Then at least let me thank you for saving us. We can meet tomorrow, just the two of us." Meguru, being a lifelong virgin, wasn't able to pick up her intention and just agreed. Just to be extra careful, she asked him, "So who is Kana to you?" Kana, who heard this, perks right up, probably expecting some sweet, heartwarming answer. And Meguru, without giving it a single thought, says she's just a regular member of my team. At this point, you could literally hear Kana's heart shatter into a million pieces. Nozomi was thrilled with this answer as her eyes lit up. Meguru was completely confused by her reaction. Meanwhile, Kana is just watching them leave, having a full-blown internal panic attack, thinking to herself, what the hell just happened? So the next morning, Meguru is getting ready to leave for his date, completely oblivious to the storm cloud brewing in the corner of the room. Kana is just staring daggers at him and mutters to herself, "After you said you cared about me, you idiot." Sometime later, he arrives at the meeting spot to find Nozomi already there, waving at him with a bright smile. He asks how long she's been waiting, and she just waves her head in denial, claiming she's been there for less than 5 minutes after a quick chat. They head to a seriously fancy restaurant, and our boy was actually impressed, telling her the food is really good and that she seems to know her way around good restaurants. Nozomi is practically glowing from the compliment and seeing her chance. She wanted to start firing questions at him, but controls herself and starts with a casual, "So what do you do on your days off?" He gives the most pathetic answer imaginable, saying he just rests since he can't get any requests. Hearing this, Nozomi's face lit up, but once again, not wanting to let the curiosity get the better of her, she straight up asked him, "So you don't have a girlfriend, do you?" Meguru thinks to himself, where does that come from? And just nods, answering her question. Seeing her face lit up from pure joy, Meguru thinks to himself, what the hell is wrong with her? Just as she's about to ask for his ring size, she remembers herself and gets serious. Feeling odd about the situation, he too asks what she does on her days off, and she says she rests too. Then turning her face all serious, she brings up what he said in the dungeon the other day about how overestimating your skills can end in tragedy. She admits that it already happened to her once. She got arrogant, bit off more than she could chew, and lost her best friend because of it with almost teary eyes. She says, "I never want to experience anything like that again. That's why I work so hard." Crossing his arms, he told her, "I understand in that aspect. We're more alike than I thought. It's a genuine connection, a perfect moment," which this dumbass immediately shatters by adding, "I don't want Kana to get hurt again. I will make sure to protect her. That's the only thing on my mind." Nozomi's face freezes. After mustering up her courage, she asks him, "By the way, what is your relationship with her? Are you really just in the same group?" Meguru, in a moment of pure dumbassery, blurted out, "We're just members of a group who live together." With widened eyes, Nozomi asks him, "You do what?" And Meguru, our fumble king, just went, "Didn't I tell you? Kana and I live in the same room." After they leave the restaurant, Nozomi is so depressed she's practically dragging her feet on the pavement. Meguru, finally sensing he might have fucked up, suggests they stop at a weapons and armor store to cheer her up, and what do you know? This actually works. She immediately brightens, geeking out over the enchanted swords. A shopkeeper with a thick Chinese accent approaches them. Nozomi finds a particularly badass sword, gives it a few swings, and hands it to Meguru, telling him to try it out. He does, admitting it feels like a good sword before adding that he doesn't know much about swords. Hearing this, the shopkeeper asks him what kind of sword he normally uses. He summons Sito's sword, the black blade with a distinctive raven mark on the hilt. The second the shopkeeper sees it, his friendly smile vanishes, replaced by pure murderous rage. His accent thickens as he snarls, "So you work for Matsubara?" He whips out a small knife and lunges straight at Meguru, who immediately shoves Nozomi behind him and parries the attack with Sito's sword. "Did you say Matsubara?" he asks, trying to get a handle on the situation. But the shopkeeper is in no mood to listen to him as he screams out, "Shut up and die," while lunging at him again. Meguru dodges and tries to tell the guy it's a misunderstanding, but the dude is just not listening. Finally getting tired of this, Meguru decides to end it. He puts his sword away, catches the shopkeeper's knife hand with zero effort, and says, "If you insist on attacking me, I can't help it." Then in one smooth motion, he tackles the man to the floor, pinning him down without actually hurting him, and says, "I'm trying not to hurt you, but you need to stop." Then in what has to be the most awkward date ending in human history, he turns to Nozomi, who has been watching this whole situation unfold, and says this was fun, but we should probably call it a day. He drags the still struggling shopkeeper into the warehouse, leaving a completely bewildered Nozomi standing alone. In the back, Meguru finally gets the guy to listen. "I don't work for Matsubara. If I worked for him, you'd already be dead." That seems to get through the shopkeeper's thick skull, and the guy looks embarrassed. Now that he has his attention, Meguru starts asking him questions and starts with asking him why he thought he worked for him. The man explains that the raven symbol on his sword is Matsubara's mark, a brand that all his people and their weapons have. Meguru summons the sword and the shopkeeper freaks out, saying yes, this symbol, it has a portion of the dungeon master's power in it. Asking him if he doesn't work for Matsubara, then why does he have this sword? Meguru explains that he got the sword after clearly killing one of Matsubara's men. The shopkeeper hadn't seen that coming. Meguru puts the sword away and says that now it's my turn to ask questions. He lets out a little bit of his power flare and goes, now you've answered my questions. Why do you know so much about Matsubara? The man, without wasting a moment, told him that he had been investigating him for the past 5 years in order to kill him. He explains that 100 years ago, when Matsubara became the dungeon master and got absurd powers, he started letting the monsters out of his dungeon for fun. Meguru nods along, listing off the powers dungeon masters got, such as creating dungeons, eternal youth controlling their own dungeon, and a massive power-up from their S-rank dungeon's blessing. Listening to the old man's story, he yells out he can't get away with using his power for evil, but the shopkeeper just shakes his head, stating that Matsubara saw other people as nothing more than toys. He created new taxes just to line his own pockets, leaving everyone else to starve. And if anyone even thought about protesting, they would be thrown off the building without a parachute. Then he asks Meguru if he's heard of the Happiness Group. Meguru, sensing a horrible irony, says he has a hunch. The man confirms it, calling it the worst thing imaginable. It was an all-girl group created to serve Matsubara. Officially, they were just there to give massages and sing for him. But the reality was much, much darker. His own daughter was kidnapped to be a part of it, and when his wife tried to resist, they took her away too, as he told him that the old scars resurfaced, and he said that when I promised I would kill him. He explains that he came to Japan because it's impossible to kill Matsubara inside his own dungeon, and he learned that Bastard would be visiting. In fact, he's here right now. The man bows, apologizing for attacking him, but Meguru just brushes it off, telling him not to worry about it. But he adds bluntly, you'll never be ready to defeat Matsubara. That sets the shopkeeper off. He throws a punch, screaming, what could you possibly know? Meguru dodges it effortlessly as he says, I know more than you, and while I empathize with you, that doesn't change the overwhelming difference in power between you and him. Besides, I'll be the one who kills Matsubara. The shopkeeper is completely stunned by this, but Meguru just says that he has his own history with the man. Seeing the resolve in his eyes, the shopkeeper flinches. Realizing they're on the same side, he says, then you should join my group. We all have to work together. We can always use more friends. Without even thinking for a minute, Meguru immediately rejects the shopkeeper's offer, making it clear he has no interest in making friends and that he has to be the one to kill Matsubara with his own 2 hands, while thinking to himself, Kana is the only person he can trust, and that's final. He won't repeat the same mistake again. The shopkeeper gets pissed, yelling about how his group is strong, and that Meguru will be in trouble if he refuses, but Meguru just stops, turns around, and tells him he doesn't care what he says, telling him that there is nothing he can say or do that'll make him change his mind. The next day, he tells Kana he's leaving to meet someone, just like they discussed yesterday. Before leaving, he tells her that he'll be back in an hour and asks her to stay inside the house. The second the door closes, Kana goes from 0 to 100 on the psycho-jealousy scale. Convinced he's going to meet that pink-haired girl again, while imagining him being all lovey-dovey with her, she starts rolling around on the floor, screaming about why he's hiding things from her. After her little meltdown, she throws on some clothes and decides today is the day she becomes a private investigator. She starts following him, trying her best to be sneaky, which she is absolutely terrible at. At one point, Meguru literally stops and looks right in her direction, but she manages to duck behind a corner just in time. He eventually arrives at a massive warehouse, the reason for his visit finally becoming clear. He's here to sort out this hole who gets to kill Matsubara mess with the Chinese group. He opens the door to find a bunch of dudes in military-style uniforms waiting for him. One of them steps forward, saying they heard about his meeting with their guy, but they need to be convinced. Since he won't join them, they have to test him. Before Meguru can even respond, they surround him and one of the guys throws a punch. Meguru just sighs, blocks the punch, and counters with a shot to the guy's stomach, grabs his arm, and throws him to the floor. 3 more guys immediately jump him, but it's clear they have absolutely no real combat experience. Meguru just weaves through them, dropping them one by one without even breaking a sweat, thinking to himself that if this is all they are, then there is no chance of them ever getting their revenge on Matsubara. Just as another dude wipes the blood from his face and prepares to get his ass kicked, the guy who seems to be the leader just throws up his hands and says enough, we're done. The fight is over. He walks up to Meguru, extends a hand, and says, your name is Meguru, right? You're incredibly strong for your age. Meguru gives a half-assed thanks for the compliment. The leader then officially surrenders the cause and says, here, as promised, we entrust our revenge to you. All the information we have on Matsubara is all yours now. While they're hashing out the details, Kana is hiding around the corner listening in. She's mostly just relieved he's talking to a bunch of dudes and not Nozomi, but she's still confused as hell. And of course she's not sneaky enough, and Meguru hears a sound. He peeks around the corner and spots her. Seeing her, he asks, "Why did you come here?" She immediately starts apologizing, saying she was just curious and ended up following him. Meguru can only hope she didn't hear the important parts of their conversation. But then Kana grabs his hand, her usual cheerful expression replaced with a look of genuine worry as she says, "Hey Meguru, can you tell me what you are hiding from me?" Kana finally lost her cool, getting right in Meguru's face. She demanded to know everything that he had been hiding, especially about his last conversation, where he was talking about revenge and Matsubara. Hearing this, Meguru completely panics. He thinks to himself how he can't tell her the truth that she's his reincarnated sister, and this is all about their past lives without the risk of completely breaking her brain with the traumatic memories. So he makes the absolute worst possible choice that he could. Withdrawing his hand, he said, "Kana, I can't tell you that." After hearing that, Kana looks at him, heartbroken and furious, as she says, "You've changed a lot. You've been keeping secrets from me and I can't trust you anymore," before turning to leave, screaming at him to stay away and leave her alone as she runs off. Meguru is left standing there, completely stunned by the mess he just made. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Matsubara is fuming in his limo, thinking to himself how this jobless nobody, Izumi Meguru, killed his A-rank enforcer Sato, and for that, he wants to crush him personally. But a direct attack is too risky and would draw unwanted attention. Just as he's pondering how to handle it, he spots Kana walking down the street looking miserable. He even notes how much she looks like Meguru's sister. He decides then and there that as long as Meguru poses any threat, no matter how small, he has to die, just like he killed him and his sister all those years ago. The scene cuts back to Kana, sitting alone on a swing set, drowning in regret. She feels she was too cruel, but she just hates being kept in the dark. A fight wasn't what she wanted, but his refusal to trust her with his secrets hurt more than anything. But as Kana sits there on the swings, her brain finally starts working. She realizes maybe, just maybe, she was the one wrong in this situation, thinking to herself that Meguru might have a good reason for hiding things, and since she was the one who stalked him in the first place, she's probably not in a position to be blaming anyone. Deciding she needs to be the bigger person and make up, she pulls out her phone and sends him a quick text, saying she was sorry for her behavior earlier and that she's heading back to their room. But just as she hits send, someone approaches her. She looks up and sees a smiling man who practically radiates serial killer vibes. She asks if he's talking to her, and he just says, "Now I'm not someone suspicious." Kana mutters to herself, "Did I say that out loud?" It takes her a second, but then it clicks. She's seen this guy's face before. He's one of the 6 heroes and the leader of the guys from before. Matsubara asks if she's Meguru's companion, claiming they know each other. Then he dangles the bait and says, "I could tell you something about his past that you don't know." Kana hesitates, taking a step back, but the temptation is too strong. She just had a massive fight with Meguru over his secrets, and now this guy is offering them up on a silver platter. She knows he's dangerous, but her curiosity wins out. She agrees to listen, telling herself she'll just run away if things get bad. Plus, she still has the charm that Meguru gave her, so she should be fine. Matsubara grins, raises his fist, and says, "Then let me tell you all about it." Kana flinches and closes her eyes, and just like that, her amulet flares to life, creating a shield of magical light around her. But this wasn't some D-rank chump that she was facing. This was Matsubara, one of the 6 most dangerous people in the world. The magic washes over him, and all it does is make the Sekko smile wider before the amulet shatters into dust. He mutters about how trifling she is before punching her square in the stomach, knocking her out. As she collapses to the ground, he picks her up, throws her over his shoulder, and walks away. "I'll tell you everything," he says to her unconscious form, "right after I call Izumi Meguru to the place I need him." He brings Kana to some dingy-ass dungeon. He has tied her up to some wooden boards and is just staring at her as he says, "This looks good," prompting Kana to say, "You bastard." There's nothing good about this, before adding how there's no way someone like him could ever defeat Meguru. Matsubara just hits her with his usual evil smile and says she's quite cute, grabbing her face and dialing the creep factor up to 11 by adding that he likes her sassy side. And then he declares that when the battle is over, he's going to take her as his bride. Kana looks at him completely horrified. As if he couldn't get any worse, Matsubara takes her phone out of her pocket, starts scrolling through her messages with Meguru, and calls their exchange amazing. Kana screams at him to give her phone back, so he does the most classic, try-hard villain thing imaginable. He punches the wall right next to her head and says, "You just need to watch," telling her he'll let her have a front-row seat to watch Meguru get crushed by despair and fear. At the same time, Meguru is back at their apartment, pacing around and wondering why Kana hasn't come back yet. It even sent her a text saying he was sorry too. Just then, his phone rings. It's Kana's number. He answers, expecting to hear her voice, but instead, some dude greets him by name. Meguru immediately tenses up, asking who the hell he was just to be hit with the "I took your woman" line. Before Meguru can even process it, Matsubara interrupts him, tells him where to go if he wants her back, and then hangs up. Meguru is left screaming into a dead phone, absolutely furious that he didn't get any answers. A second later, a map just conveniently pops up on his screen with a pin dropped on the location. I don't know who it was, Meguru thinks to himself, clutching his phone so hard it's a miracle it doesn't shatter, but he interfered with something he shouldn't have. Sometime later, he arrives at the marked location, his eyes scanning the area. Looking at the phone, he mutters, it must be here somewhere. Meguru finally gets to his destination and after walking for a bit, spots his target. Matsubara is just sitting by a campfire next to a dungeon portal. That was pretty, he mutters. But Meguru recognizes that voice, and as he does, a sick sense of satisfaction washes over him, and a realization hits him that he has heard that voice somewhere. And then he mutters out that he's actually glad it's this bastard, because it saves him the trouble of hunting him down later. He points his sword straight at Matsubara's face and says, "You are going to die." Matsubara slowly gets to his feet, gesturing to the portal. He says, "There is no need to rush. Your woman is inside this dungeon, you know, and if I die, the dungeon will disappear along with her." He lowers his sword. Matsubara just grins and strolls into the portal, telling Meguru to follow him into the dungeon that he has created, saying that it has no monsters and is absolutely perfect for getting rid of people. Meguru immediately connects the dots as he said, "That double dungeon in front of our house, that was you too, right?" Then it dawns on him that he has been asking the wrong question. Gripping the hilt of his sword, he said, "Is Kana hurt or not?" Matsubara, enjoying this way too much, just opens a door and says, "Why don't you take a look for yourself?" They walk into a room and there she is, chained to some wooden boards. Meguru immediately runs to her side, telling her to wait a little and promising that he'll free her, but before he can do anything, Matsubara summons a ridiculously huge hammer and says, "In that case, we can begin." Meguru turns to face him before throwing one last question at him. "Why do you hate me so much?" "I'm just a jobless D-rank." He thinks for a moment and says, "It's because you look like someone. Some guy from 100 years ago that I didn't like one bit. That's all." Meguru just stares at him for a second and goes, "I understand, and if that's the case, then let me tell you something interesting. That jobless guy you dislike so much is none other than me." After the small talk was over, Meguru didn't waste any time. He swung his sword with full force, and in that instant, his entire body burst with a powerful wave of magical energy. Matsubara's eyes widened as he was taken completely by surprise. The way Meguru moved, the energy he radiated, it was all too familiar. He muttered to himself, "That style, that presence, there's no mistaking it." Gritting his teeth, Matsubara raised his weapon and their blades collided with a deafening clash. Meguru tried to match the force, but it wasn't even close. He was pushed back several meters, sliding across the ground. Matsubara didn't hold back his remarks as he said, "You're weak. You're nothing like you were 100 years ago." And deep down, Meguru knew he was right. The difference in power between them was huge and undeniable. But that didn't mean the fight was over. Not by a long shot. Meguru gripped his sword tighter, thinking fast. He knew he couldn't win through brute strength, but maybe, just maybe, he could outsmart him. His eyes locked onto Matsubara's left shoulder. There was something off about that piece of armor. It was heavier and uneven. Meguru figured it wasn't just for defense. It had to be some kind of magical artifact. Maybe it boosted Matsubara's mana temporarily, allowing him to move with surprising agility despite his massive size. That would explain a lot. And if that was the case, then that piece of armor might just be the key to winning. Crouching low, Meguru began drawing a glowing magic circle on the ground using his energy. The moment it was complete, he shot forward at incredible speed as he said, "Didn't you just say I'm weak, but you've let your guard down?" Matsubara was caught off guard by the sudden charge. Meguru dashed past him and with a swift strike, his blade scraped the shoulder pad, leaving a small but visible cut. Matsubara turned, clearly surprised, as he said, "You are fast." That was all Meguru needed to hear. The two launched into a flurry of attacks, dodging, blocking, and striking again and again. At one point, Matsubara raised his hammer high and slammed it into the ground, sending a shockwave through the floor. But Meguru jumped just in time, sailing into the air, and with all his might, he brought his sword down, releasing a burst of magical energy mid-swing. His blade struck the shoulder pad directly, cracking the armor. Matsubara stepped back, stunned as he yelled, "What was that?" Landing softly, Meguru stood tall and said, "I did it." Then turning to Matsubara, he said, "Before I kill you, answer me something. Why are you building forces in Japan? What are you planning?" Matsubara narrowed his eyes and Meguru raised his sword and pressed it toward him as he said, "Answer me." And then Matsubara finally spoke. "So you don't know, do you? Japan's not just any place. It's special. The Sky Dungeon disappeared there 100 years ago. People use some of its mana for their wishes, but most of it is still there. I believe that it was your share, and it has crystallized now somewhere in Japan," adding that if he could get his hand on the crystal, he could become strong enough to wipe out the other heroes and finally take over the world. But the other heroes have the same idea, and as soon as that crystal is found, it's going to be an all-out war for power. Listening to this, Meguru replies, "That's just like you." Greedy and pathetic, he raised his sword again and said, "Give it up. That dream of yours, they'll never come true." And with that, he lunged in for the final blow. But just as the sword came down, Matsubara grinned and threw a punch. He caught Meguru's arm mid-swing. Meguru was stunned to process what just happened, seeing his confused face. Matsubara asks, "Did you really think that magical item was my weak point?" Before punching him so hard in the stomach he was flying into a wall. Kana screams his name from across the room. Matsubara looked down at him and said, "You still don't get it, do you? I've lived a long time. I rebuilt my body years ago. I don't need that toy anymore. I don't need it anymore. And for you, that's really bad news." Meguru gets up, wiping the blood off of his face. He leans on his sword and thinks to himself how this fight is not going to be an easy one. But then he remembers all the cool items he's been collecting ever since he woke up for a moment like this, thinking to himself, this fight isn't going to be a walk in the park, but I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. He feels pretty confident and says out loud that this time will be different. He knows he can't take this guy down as he is right now, so he needs a better plan. That's when Meguru has an idea. He powers up his sword with some serious magical energy, so much that the ceiling starts to crumble. His plan was to mess up the ground and make it super uneven. He figures that if he just sprinkles some magic around, his opponent won't be able to use his famous power on the slippery, messy soil. With his trap set, Meguru starts running toward Matsubara. Being jobless, he's learned to adapt to any situation. He channels his energy and unleashes a flame blast. He then quickly drinks a potion, hoping that'll be enough to take Matsubara out, but he has a feeling they're just getting started. And he's right. Matsubara emerges from the attack with a grin, his eyes glowing. He swings his massive hammer, and Meguru knows his only chance is to dodge the first hit and then hit him with a spell. As Matsubara swings, he smirks and calls Meguru knave. But Meguru has a smile of his own, thinking he's about to neutralize the attack. Matsubara is totally shocked when his hammer blow does nothing. Meguru seizes the moment and strikes back with his sword, sending Matsubara flying to the ground. For a second, Meguru thinks, wow, that was my last resort, but it actually worked. But Matsubara just laughs it off, saying he didn't even feel it. He calls all of Meguru's efforts cheap tricks and says his attacks are way too weak. He puts a hand on his own shoulder and says that all these strange abilities are just because of Meguru's jobless class and what a mess he's made. Then to Meguru's shock, he lifts his hammer and the whole dungeon ceiling starts to repair itself. Seeing the dungeon repair itself, Meguru gets surprised as he asks, "What is this?" Matsubara just smiles and asks why he's so surprised, reminding him that it's his own dungeon. He then creates a flame in his hand, asking if he's surprised by that too. Suddenly, monsters start appearing all around them. Gargoyles fly toward Meguru and tries to fight them off with magic. But then he looks down and sees another monster biting his leg. While Meguru is distracted, Matsubara smirks and hits him with his hammer, shouting, "Don't forget about me." The blow sends Meguru flying several meters back. He hits the ground hard and thinks about how big the power difference is between them and feels a wave of hopelessness. His enemy is right there and he can't do a thing. He wonders if this is just going to be a repeat of what happened 100 years ago. Just then, a powerful energy fills his hand, and the mark on it starts to glow brightly. He stares at it, confused, and just then a system window pops up in front of him, asking if he wants to consume all of Crest's power to obtain the power of duty. Meguru stared at the glowing system window in front of him, and then his eyes locked onto the fine print. If he didn't replenish his energy within 30 seconds, he would die. Confused, he glanced at the mark glowing on his hand as he thought to himself, what exactly is this? But then he shook his head and thought, doesn't matter. If his power could make him stronger, he had no reason to hesitate. With a firm press on the screen, he accepted the offer, and instantly, the system notified him that his attack power and speed had each increased by 500 points. Just then, a monster came flying straight at him, but Meguru leaped high into the air. He smiled midair, gathering all his strength, and then brought his blade down hard, taking out several monsters in one sweeping, explosive attack. Surrounded by radiant energy, Meguru grinned and said aloud that he was completely overwhelmed with power. Matsubara, still watching, couldn't believe his eyes as he muttered, "This is impossible. Why do you have that crest?" Meguru tilted his hand toward him and asked casually, "Did you mean this thing?" He explained that after their deaths 100 years ago, the Sky Dungeon had granted each of them powers based on their final wishes. Matsubara frowned, clenched his fists, and muttered that he'd already said too much but added that it didn't matter. According to him, the dungeon must have recognized Meguru as one of the ones who cleared it, which was surprising but ultimately pointless, as he was going to die by his hands today. But Meguru pulled out his sword and went, "Are you sure about that?" Suddenly, Matsubara slammed his foot down, shattering the floor beneath them and released a massive burst of energy. He raised his hands and conjured a huge fireball, launching it straight at Meguru. Without hesitation, Meguru raised his hand and froze the fireball in place, and the intense flame instantly crumbled into shards of ice. Then, using the moment, he charged at Matsubara with incredible speed, and with one clean strike, sliced off his opponent's hand. Matsubara screamed and collapsed. Meguru stood over him as he said, "I can move like it's nothing. And this power, it feels endless. I could kill you here and now." Matsubara begged him to stop, but it only angered Meguru as he said, "How dare you beg? When 100 years ago you were killing us, did you even hesitate for a second?" He raised his hand again, summoning a flurry of ice crystals in the air, and said, "My answer is the same as yours." Meguru used the ice spear spell, sending multiple frozen spears into Matsubara's body, pinning him violently to the wall. Meguru stepped forward and said, "That's it. The first target is down. It feels kind of disappointing." Just then, The system chimed in, announcing that the crest's power has been replenished and the power-up duty has been expired, and then multiple system windows appeared in front of him, and Meguru wondered if his stats were finally returning to normal. He wondered if the power of the crest had something to do with it. He wonders, does this system boost my strength only when I kill people? Pushing all these thoughts behind, he rushed to check on Kana. Calling out to her, he ran over and eventually freed her. She looked up at him with tears of joy, hugged him tightly, and thanked him. Meguru gently patted her head and told her he was glad she was okay. She apologized for always getting into trouble, but he just smiled and said, "You don't need to apologize. You're my reason to live." Kana blushed and asked quietly, "Did you really call me your reason to live?" Meguru awkwardly took her hand and told her to forget he said that, saying that they had to exit this dungeon as soon as possible, but there is just one problem with that. But there was no exit in sight. Suddenly, the dungeon began to shake and the ceiling cracked and chunks of stone fell. Kana called out, panicking, reminding him that since Matsubara had created the dungeon and he was now dead, the whole place was falling apart. Meguru realized the exit was too far away, and if this continued, they were going to be buried alive. But then a thought hits him. If the dungeon was made with Matsubara's power, he summoned the sword he received from Sato and remembered that mana was the soul of both magic and dungeons. If he could analyze the mana structure, maybe he could break the dungeon's core. He focused energy into the sword, locked onto the dungeon's magic network, and struck, shattering the magic core, and they escaped just in time. Breathing heavily, Kana points out how they barely survived. Meguru nodded, saying, "Yeah, that was close." But as she turned toward him, she saw him collapsing. She rushed forward to catch him before he hit the ground. The next morning, Meguru woke up in a hospital bed, blinking against the bright lights and slowly piecing together where he was. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the crest. Staring at it, he thought to himself how it had faded a little. Just as he started to zone out, the door burst open and Kana flew in, throwing her arms around him in a hug. She mumbled about how scared she was and how he shouldn't ever do that again. But before he could even say anything comforting, a nurse stepped in and froze. She raised her brow at the very not hospital-friendly position they were in. Without wasting a second, she called in a doctor who strolled in, checked Meguru out, and declared that it had just been a really bad fever. He told the nurse to get his discharge papers ready, and turning to Meguru, he said that he needed to stay one more night just in case. The nurse didn't want to catch them again in a not-so-friendly position and dipped out of there, leaving Meguru and Kana alone. Once the door clicked shut, Meguru turned to her and said, "So you carried me all the way here? Wasn't I heavy?" Kana just shook her head, but then her face got real serious and she said, "Tell me what happened between you and Matsubara." Meguru hesitated, not sure if he should even go there, but something in her expression made him cave. He sighed, dropped his voice, and said, "Okay, so you must know that 100 years ago, 8 hunters went into the Sky Dungeon and only 6 came back out. They got power from the dungeon and went on to rule different corners of the world. Matsubara, that scum, he was one of them." Kana nodded slowly, repeating what they were always told by the government, that one of the hunters, a healer girl named Kana, died protecting her team, and the other, there aren't any records left of the other guy. Listening to this, Meguru muttered, "But the truth is that the last hunter didn't die fighting. He was betrayed, stabbed in the back by his own team as he was just about to tell her the full truth that he was that betrayed hunter." The door swung open again and a wild Nozomi appeared, completely out of breath, gasping for air as she said, "I came as soon as I heard you fainted. Are you okay?" Meguru blinked in confusion as he said, "Yeah, I'm fine." "Wait, who told you?" Nozomi just shrugged and said, "I check in with the Hunter Association." Kana shot her a death glare, thinking to herself if she was planning on staying here. Meguru just laughed it off, thinking, "Okay, I guess it makes sense. Every hunter's info goes through the association anyway." He turned to Nozomi with a grin and said, "Thanks for coming to check on me," and as he said that, Nozomi's face lit up. Meanwhile, Kana was mentally throwing tables, glaring at the two of them, cursing them for being all lovey-dovey in front of her. That's when Nozomi asked, "You seem fine," and Meguru, being the classic knucklehead, said, "I can't die yet. I still gotta protect Kana." And just like that, tables had turned. Now it was Kana's turn to blush and smile, her imagination going wild with romantic anime moments while she started giving Nozomi the side-eye. Meguru sat there between them, stressed, thinking, what even is this tension? While the girls were busy with their stare-off, Meguru sighed to himself, realizing this definitely wasn't the moment to go deeper into his past. It just wasn't the vibe. After a while, both girls left the room and Meguru waved them off, finally getting a moment of peace. Bored, he grabbed the remote and turned on the TV just to pass the time. But what he saw made his blood run cold. On the screen was none other than Matsubara giving an interview to a thick news reporter. Meguru stared at the screen, thinking to himself, what the hell is going on? Why is Matsubara alive? Didn't I kill him? Just like that, time flies by and our boy Meguru is back inside a dungeon committing straight-up monster genocide with Kana and Nozomi. All of them are working together like some kind of dream team, completely in sync, covering each other's backs and absolutely demolishing the dungeon boss. After clearing the whole place, Meguru gives his hand a little squeeze and mutters that this was perfect for getting back into the swing of things. Just then, the system window chimes in, letting him know his stats went up. This time, except for his attack stats, literally everything else got boosted. Not bad, right? Nozomi, looking back at how Meguru performed during the raid, says she wasn't sure about him charging into a dungeon first thing after getting out of the hospital, but it seems like he's doing just fine. She was worried for nothing, but Meguru chuckles, saying it's nothing like that. And at this point, you can practically guess Kana's had enough of this wholesome bullshit. Meanwhile, our boy's mind drifts back to yesterday's events, thinking about how that trash Matsubara was actually alive. Now that he has revealed all of his tricks to that bastard, Meguru knows he's got to grind even harder. Later, they report to the Hunters Association that they cleaned out the dungeon and collect their sweet rewards. As Meguru and the team are about to head out, the association chief walks in and tells our boy they need to talk, asking if he's free. Meanwhile, over in China, Matsubara is freaking out in his dungeon. He's thinking about how he would have been completely done for if he hadn't used his soul crest to separate his soul from his body and store it safe inside the dungeon. Smart move for a trash bag, honestly. That's when his butler walks in, all serious, asking if it's true that he got his ass handed to him. Matsubara, trying to save face, tells the guy not to freak out. He claims he just dropped his guard and got careless, adding that it wasn't a big deal since he'd already anticipated something like this might happen. He then turns and heads for the door to check up on his people, which translates to seeing how his slaves are doing. He's wandering around the dungeon when this little girl gets all excited seeing him and clings to his legs. And like the absolute trash he is, he gets pissed and kicks the little girl so hard she faints on the spot. Seriously, what kind of monster does that? He heads to his club room to enjoy himself, but the image of getting completely wrecked by our boy keeps playing in his mind non-stop. Whipping out his phone, he stares at Meguru's photo, cursing about how because of him, he can't even relax. His little pity party gets interrupted when he hears his butler screaming. He looks around and sees his former colleagues standing there. Futaba gives him that psychotic smile of hers and asks if he was looking down on them with his shitty security before casually greeting him. Matsubara is shocked to see them and asks why the hell they invaded his territory. Cutting to the chase, Four Eyes says, "You never imagined that 2 of the 6 heroes would get stronger, did you?" Before whipping out his undead army, he adds that it only makes sense to target the weakest of the 6 heroes first. Four Eyes goes into his internal monologue telling Matsubara how he'd gotten careless over the past 70 years while they'd gotten way stronger than him. Then Four Eyes starts spewing some philosophical bullshit about how as long as they keep changing, improvement is inevitable, it's just that they need to change in the right way. By this time, his skeleton soldiers have pretty much neutralized Matsubara. Seeing her chance, the psychotic girl lunges at him, grabs his head, launches a fireball, and sends him straight to hell. She comments on how pathetic the fight was and how she could have handled it alone without Four Eyes' help. But Four Eyes shoots back with, "Don't get ahead of yourself. If he hadn't been so exhausted, he would have easily turned the tables on you." Futaba then asks if this was all he needed. Giving his glasses a little push, he summons Matsubara as one of his minions and says, "Yes, and now it's time to save this rotten world." Meanwhile, back at the Hunters Association, our boy is having a little chat with the chief. Cutting right to the chase, the chief asks him what his relationship is to that trash Matsubara. Meguru gets caught off guard hearing this. He totally wasn't expecting the chief to bring up that topic. Seeing our boy's reaction, the chief tells him to calm down, saying he's not suspecting him or anything. Then he goes on to explain that according to their investigation, all of the heroes have something called a crest that grants them special powers and abilities. There's a huge variety in what kind of abilities these things can grant, and there's certain Matsubara uses that ability to zip around the world. He adds that whenever that bastard fights someone stronger than him, he just bails from the situation using that power of his. Meguru decides to speak up and says, "Well, in that case, that makes things easier." This gets the chief looking at him curiously, so our boy starts explaining everything that went down. Pausing for a second, the chief says, "To think you actually defeated Matsubara." Stroking his chin, he adds, "You're better than I thought." The chief continues, "You must know that the tyranny of those heroes is extreme. It's a good thing that Japan hasn't been affected yet, but as long as they exist, it's just a matter of time." Then getting all serious, he looks at our boy and says, "I want to establish true peace. Will you help me? Work together with me?" As soon as he hears that, the old clip of him getting stabbed in the back starts playing in his head. The chief keeps going with his speech, saying that Japan's current situation isn't as extreme as other countries, so there's nothing to fear except the occasional monsters. The irony of the situation is that they have those 6 bastards to thank for that stability. Meguru asks what makes Japan so special compared to all the other countries. The chief tells him it's special for 2 reasons. First, it's the homeland of all 6 heroes, but it's also the place where the Sky Dungeon appeared 100 years ago, a dungeon that 8 heroes conquered. After the dungeon collapsed, its mana hardened until it became lumps of mana known as crystals, which then scattered all over Japan. Thinking for a second, he adds, "It seems they're searching for these crystals." Our boy thinks to himself, "So Matsubara is looking for them, I see. But if they want them so badly, why haven't they collected them during the last century?" The chief tells him they're not sure, but they think the status of Dungeon Master is getting in their way somehow. He explains that while they receive immortal bodies and great powers from the dungeon, it's also what's restricting them at the same time. The chief continues his explanation while Meguru just listens. He tells our boy that the wavelength of mana emitted by the heroes and their respective dungeons are identical, which leads them to believe that the heroes aren't ruling the dungeons, they become one with them. At this point, Meguru recalls something Matsubara had said to him. It was similar to the chief's theory. Meguru asks if that means the dungeon they rule gets destroyed and they'll die alongside it as well. The chief tells him they aren't sure, but that's definitely a possibility. Continuing with his explanation, he says it seems like they can't move unless their dungeon is in order, or at least that's what all the clues lead to. Meanwhile, Meguru just sits there processing everything the chief just dropped on him. The chief then pleads with Meguru to help them, saying that recent incidents indicate more dangerous situations will be arising soon. Seeing our boy hesitate, the chief says he'll be compensated accordingly, saying he'll do everything he asks. Meguru, listening to this, goes, "Really? Anything?" The chief nods, saying, "Yes, just name it. What do you want? Money? Status? Power? Information?" Grabbing his chance, Meguru says, "Then allow me first priority rights to B-rank dungeons and above." The chief casually asks which area he wants, to which our boy replies he wants exclusive rights of dungeons for the whole damn country. Thinking to himself about how to get as strong as possible, he knows he'll have to eliminate as many dungeons as possible. The chief tells him he'll see what he can do, while adding that he's looking forward to their partnership. Meguru nods and tells the director he'll be working with Kana on this mission, but asks him not to tell her about their little arrangement. The chief agrees. Meanwhile, our boy is thinking to himself about how he believes he can protect Kana if she's closer to him, and how he can't do anything if she's not by his side. The chief asks if that's all he wants, causing Meguru to look in with bewilderment. Seeing this reaction, the chief says, "You know you'll be fighting against the 6 heroes. Surely you don't think you two can pull that off alone?" Adding that he can introduce him to some powerful people if he wants. That's when our boy gets a light bulb moment and mutters, "I didn't even think about that." Getting up, he says, "Well, in that case, there's someone I want you to add to my party." The next morning, Meguru and Kana went to Nozomi, asking her to join their party. As he did, her face lit up, and she probably might have even imagined all sorts of scenarios in her head about living with our boy. But all of that came crashing down when she asked if the offer extends to her friends too. Meguru just shook his head, telling her he only wants her. This prompts her to ask why her friends can't join. Our boy tells her straight to the face that if they come with them, they'll die for sure, and by the looks of it, her friends know it too. But in reality, he's not some saint looking out for them. He's just concerned that if they tag along, they'll drag the team down, since Nozomi is the only strong one in their group. This asshole even thinks about how if he brings them along, he could sacrifice them if Kana ever gets in danger. That's when Nozomi gives him her reply, saying that if that's the case, she can't join him. That would mean betraying her friends. She adds that she wants to help him, but not at the cost of abandoning and betraying her friends. Without waiting for his reply, she gets up, tells her friends they're done here, and starts to walk away. Her friends, meanwhile, give each other a serious nod, then turn to Meguru and say they'd like to make a proposal. The flat-chested one says they like to support Nozomi, but they're aware they can't keep up with her. Still, they've been friends and hunters in the same party for so long that they don't want to separate. Bowing to Meguru, they ask him for a chance to prove themselves. Our boy, not giving a damn about this emotional situation, just asks what happens if they can't prove themselves. The girls reply that if that's the case, they'll dissolve the party on their own. This causes Nozomi to yell that they don't get to decide that on their own. At this point, the white-haired girl just turns and tells her to shut up. Meguru agrees to their proposal and decides to give them a chance. Later, at a training hall, he's facing off against the girls. He tells them that if they're able to move him from his spot, he'll accept them into his party. Both girls nod in agreement, and our boy gives the signal for the test to begin. As he does, Sakura charges at him with that giant thing of hers, but Meguru just sidesteps her attack. Seeing that they're not giving this fight their all, he tells them that he might be unarmed, but they don't have to hold back. Shifting his tone to serious mode, he says, "Come at me like you're trying to kill me." Sakura charges at him again, and to be honest, what's up with these poses? It feels like the artist went to the wrong site for references. The mage girl, seeing an opening, also moves and gets behind Meguru, while he just stands there commenting on their synergy and teamwork. They attack him from both sides, but our boy just grabs Sakura's axe, yanks her away, cancels the mage girl's spell, and instantly casts one of his own. Throwing Sakura away and making his spell explode right in the mage girl's face, he taunts both of them, asking if that's all they've got. Hikari helps Sakura get up, they look at each other, and then charge at Meguru once again. Seeing this, Meguru comments that they have grit, but they're facing an immovable wall that they can't overcome with grit alone. The fight goes on for a while, and in the end, the two girls are on the ground, panting and completely out of energy. Looking at each other, one of them says, "It seems like we can't make it in the end after all." They then turn to Nozomi and apologize for not making it. Nozomi is thinking to herself that they knew they didn't stand a chance from the beginning, and they did this to give her a way out. She thanks them and says, "Let's go have cakes together." Looking at them, Meguru thinks to himself that they might not be strong enough right now, but judging from the earlier fight, that might not be the case for long. That's when he gets a call from the chief, who tells him he has something urgent to share. He says that 2 of the 6 heroes, Hidaka and Futaba, have come to Japan. And then we get hit with a flashback from 100 years ago when these jokers had killed our boy and Kana. It was just after they'd made their wish to the Sky Dungeon. A moment passed, and seeing how nothing had happened, Matsubara started losing his cool, saying how they'd cleared the dungeon but their wishes hadn't been fulfilled. After he throws his little tantrum, a bunch of system windows pop up, informing them that they become dungeon masters and that they had to find a dungeon within 72 hours and rule it, or else they'd die immediately. The system informs them of their perks, how they won't age, and other shit we won't get into, and then drops the bomb that when the dungeon collapses, they can collect the crystals. These crystals will be scattered all around Japan, and they can fulfill their wishes by collecting them. After they finish reading all the info, the fatty says it seems like only one of them can get their wish fulfilled. The assassin smiles brightly and says, "Seems like we're enemies now." Then all of them start sizing each other up. Before they could lunge at each other, the archer guide Tsurumi points at the system panel and says it seems like there's a lot of info here. Kawasaki agrees, saying the day will end before they can read it all. And guys, I'm not a motorcycle guy, but I won't mind riding this Kawasaki. That's when Psycho Girl whips out her phone and tries to take a photo of all the info, but the system doesn't let her. Seeing all these letters, Matsubara just goes, "No way in hell. I'm reading all of this." This dumbass doesn't know what's going on, and all his brain was able to make out from all the info was that he'll just have to collect that crystal thingy to get his wish fulfilled. Then, adding insult to injury, he says, "Guess I can take my time if I just kill you all first." Turning to leave, he says, "You guys can waste your time reading all of it. I'm going to China." He claims China is by far the greatest choice since it's close to Japan, and then he just leaves. Listening to this, the archer guy goes, "Well, China does have a geographical advantage, but did that dumbass really just leave without reading it all?" Then, turning to the system window, the rest of them go on to read the remaining info. Their gaze lands on a particular panel that basically says that one of them could become a god and would be able to do all sorts of logic-bending shit, which basically means only one of these fools gets to survive while the rest die. The archer guide, reading all the info, says judging by the description, it seems that it won't be able to gather them overnight. The assassin, for some weird reason, was still stuck on the fact that they'll have to kill each other. Their talks went on for a while. Back in the present, the fatty is trying to have a serious conversation with Futaba, saying how they'll have to fight each other when they deal with the others and how only one of them can make it out alive. But Futaba is more concerned about social media followers than listening to this fatso talk. Well, can't blame her. This dude is hard to look at. He asks her to put her phone away, and she does, asking if he has an idea as to how to gather the shards quicker. Fatty tells her he has an amazing plan, but he just needs a little time to get ready. At this point, she loses all interest and tells him to deal with that himself. Just then, he tries to say something, but Futaba gets all serious and says, "Hey, didn't I say I want to take some pictures? Didn't you hear my request?" And a symbol starts glowing on Fatty's neck. He tells her to go ahead and take the picture while thinking to himself how getting her to comply with his plan was difficult. In the end, he had to make a pact with her that he has to obey all of her requests and can't hurt her. Meanwhile, back in Japan, our boy has just gotten the news of 2 heroes being in the country. The chief tells him he'll give him more info later, saying they're the top priority, and he'll have to focus on them instead of Matsubara. Meguru says he doesn't have a problem with it because all that changes is the order he'll have to deal with them. The chief then tells him to swing by the Hunters Association since there's something he wants to give him. Later, he goes to the association along with Kana and Nozomi. The chief leads them to the storehouse, telling our boy that the heroes are powerful, so if he wants to fight them, he'll need a proper weapon. He then leads them into the inventory and tells them they're free to take whatever they want. After looking around for a while, a kick-ass looking sword catches Meguru's eye. He picks it up, and seeing this, the chief goes, "That's the most expensive thing we have here. That sword costs around 20 million yen. But our boy just shakes his head and says, "Not good enough. It's decent, but it won't be good enough for me. I'm used to a better weapon." Putting the sword back, he asks, "Is this the best you can offer us?" The chief says yes, at the moment that's the best they can do. He adds that if he needs a better weapon, they'd need special materials. Meguru asks him if they can give them better weapons if they give him the materials. The chief nods, saying if he could bring him a philosopher's stone, he could use it to strengthen the weapon. Meguru, who apparently was an S-rank hero, didn't know that and goes, "It can be used like that." The chief tells him it can, and if he could bring him one A-rank philosopher's stone, that could make weapons for all 3 of them. Meguru thinks to himself how he can manage without a weapon for now, but Kana and Nozomi can't, so he asks the chief where he can get a philosopher's stone. The chief tells him that they appear in A-rank dungeons and above, so he'll have to clear the dungeon in order to get his hands on the stone. Meguru starts thinking about how rare the A-rank dungeons are, so they might have to wait for quite a while before they can raid one, but that's when the chief told him that an A-rank dungeon has appeared recently in central Tokyo. This shocked Meguru as he asked, "Didn't one just appear in Shibuya yesterday?" and the chief told him that lately there has been a disturbance in the dragon's vein and mana all around Japan has been in turmoil, so that might have something to do with that. Later, as they were on their way, Nozomi told the group that she had looked into Futaba, saying that she sure is something, and handed the phone over to Meguru. Apparently, Futaba ran her social circle like a goddamn dictator, forcing her followers to like and subscribe to her Pinterest posts. Kana asks her what would happen to someone who forgets to do so, and Nozomi tells her that they'll get purged for that. Yeah, committing mass murder over likes and subscribers, that totally makes sense. She then adds that her other victims include women that are more beautiful than her and men who are nasty. Listening to this, our boy goes, well, that sure sounds awful. Nozomi then starts telling the group about Fatty, saying that dude is plain as hell. He is just her dog on a leash that is tasked with carrying out political murders for Futaba. Kana asks him if he must already know more about these guys, since he used to know them in his past life, to which Meguru replies that he does, but that was 100 years ago. Kana's curiosity gets the better of her as she asks him what kind of people they were before they stabbed him in the back. Meguru thinks to himself how he hasn't told any of them anything about their past, but decides that he'll share only enough information and hide the part about Kana being his sister and her reincarnation. He starts telling the group the story of 1 week before their raid at the Sky Dungeon. It was the first time they had met with the other 6 to discuss the plan, and the first meeting went how you would imagine. The psycho girl was still psycho, and this trash was still trash. They met in front of an A-rank dungeon, went inside, and slaughtered the monsters, impressing everyone to the point that Futaba even asked him to be her boyfriend. Don't know why he thought it was really necessary to mention that, but he rejects her, saying that he is seeing someone. As you might have guessed by now, this was the moment that she started acting like a bitch. She couldn't handle rejection, thinking to herself, what's so great about Kana? She starts plotting against her, and when she gets her chance, she pushes her, causing her to tumble to the ground. Fatty comes to help her, but dude really was a degenerate through and through. In the guise of helping her, he straight up grabs her ass. And that's when our boy decided he has had enough of this and confronts both of them. He was straight up ready to off them, but Kana calms him down, saying that she is fine, so there is no need to escalate the matter. Back in the present, they were inside the A-rank dungeon. As they entered it, they saw that all of the monsters had been taken care of. They decided to head deeper inside it in order to find who it was. That's when Meguru sees the door of the boss's chamber was open. He looks inside and sees Fatty and Futaba fighting against the dungeon boss. Sensing a presence, they turn and asked Meguru who he was. Thinking that Fatty might know him, she turns to him and asks if he knows the guy, but Fatty tells her that he is just as clueless. Seeing that none of them had lashed out at him, he wonders what's happening, and that's when it clicks to him that his face has changed after his reincarnation, so that's why none of them are recognizing him. He quickly tells the girls to wait outside, grips his sword, and thinks to himself how he doesn't know why they are here. But if he plays it smart, he can take them by surprise, but he decides it's too soon to make a move and decides to get closer to them first. He then ever so calmly asks them what they were doing here. Futaba asks him if he was the hunter that was tasked with clearing the dungeon, apologizing to him. She said they already took care of the boss, so he can return. Meguru just repeats what they said while getting closer, reminding himself every step of the way to control himself. As he gets close enough, he conjures a spell and is ready to turn these 2 bastards into ash. But Fatty notices it just in time. He pulls Futaba out of harm's way and sidesteps Meguru's attack, summoning his skeletons to distract him while they get to safety. Meguru makes quick work of the skeletons, realizing that Meguru was dangerous. Fatty then warns Futaba to be careful, saying that Meguru was not an ordinary guy. Listening to the explosion, both of the girls rush inside, and one look at Kana was enough for Futaba to recognize her. She mutters to herself, isn't that Kana Akabane? While Fatty had picked up on how she had addressed Meguru, he wonders what's going on. That's when a memory from 100 years ago comes crashing in. He remembers how Meguru moved just now using both magic and sword, and how he just attacked 2 strangers without a moment of hesitation. He figured out that he was the same Meguru that they had killed 100 years ago. He turned to Futaba and asked her to leave, saying they can't waste time here, but her psycho switch had just flipped. Seeing Kana, she got all angry, saying how she doesn't care about anything else right now, and her top priority right now is to kill that blonde girl, even if she might not have any connection with the Kana she knew, saying her face just pisses her off. And since she was in her Harley Quinn mode, she said, I'll kill the pink-haired one too while I'm at it. Fatty, who apparently has a functional brain behind his eyes, thinks to himself how she won't listen to him now that she has made up her mind, and due to the pact, he can't disobey her either, so he plays it smart and tells her that she has 30 seconds to deal with him. Futaba turns and says, what do you mean 30 seconds? To which Fatty replies, surely you can deal with them in 30 seconds. You are strong enough, are you not, or am I expecting too much right now? She wanted to give Fatty an earful, but decided to deal with Meguru and the girls first. Seeing how Futaba was just saying stuff about killing her, Nozomi asks Meguru what's going on here, adding, aren't they 2 of the 6 heroes? Before Meguru could say something, Futaba charged at them, casting spells one after another. Her first strike was directed straight at Kana, Meguru quickly pulls her away, thinking to himself how her attacks are fast and all he could do was barely dodge them, and to make matters worse, she is only attacking Kana. Nozomi told Meguru to take care of Kana while she deals with them, and without wasting a second, she straight up charges at her only to get hit in midair by one of her spells and fly straight to a wall. After taking care of Nozomi, she turns to Kana and gets all psychotic, but before she could do anything, Fatty intervenes and tells her that her 30 seconds are up, and surprisingly, she agrees to let them go for today and turns to the portal to leave. But before going, she reminds them that next time they meet, she'll kill him for sure. Without wasting a second, Kana tends to Nozomi's wounds. After she gets better, she asks Meguru how those heroes seem to know Kana and asks him what's going on. Realizing that he is cornered, Meguru thinks about how now he can't hide the truth anymore. He then turned to Kana and said, "You see, I'm not the only one that is reincarnated. You did too." Seeing the puzzled look on her face, he said, "Yeah, you were the legendary hero Kana-sama from 100 years ago. And unlike me, who lost his appearance, you're the spitting image of your past self. That's the reason why those two noticed you." Nozomi asks him, can it be that they just look similar and have no connection to each other? To which our boy says, "Nah, there's no way I'll not recognize my little sister." Kana hesitantly asks him, "So when you said all that stuff about protecting me and caring about me," but before she could finish, he just cut her off and said, "Yeah, I care about you. You're my precious family." Man, he is completely unaware that she wanted to start a family with him and be one. Then he adds that the reason he is hell-bent on taking revenge is because those bastards hurt her, and that's why he can't forgive them. Later, when they got home, Kana, whose world just flipped upside down, was deep in her own thoughts, thinking about how she is the reason why Meguru is risking his life. That's when the doorbell rang. She gets up to answer it, but Meguru tells her to just go to her room and rest. He'll answer the door. He opens the door and finds that it's Nozomi who had come to pay them a visit. He asks her what had brought her here. She just turns to Kana and tells Meguru that she wanted to talk to him. And Kana is like, "Aren't you usually here to hit on Meguru? What possibly can you have to talk to me about?" But she decided to head out with her anyways. Outside, after a bit of walking in silence, Nozomi asks Kana if it bothered her when he said that he cares for her, but as a little sister. And Kana just told her that it doesn't bother her anymore, saying it's fine as long as they can stay together. She doesn't care about the relationship, adding that what bothers her is the fact that he is dead set on taking revenge because of her. If that wasn't the case, they could have enjoyed a peaceful life. But because of her, that can't happen anymore. Then getting all gloomy, she said, "I'm sure that my previous self wouldn't have wanted him to take revenge." That's when Nozomi says that she understands how Meguru feels, saying if it was her, if someone had hurt her friends, she would have done the same. Then turning to Kana, she asked, "Wouldn't you have done the same if they had killed Meguru?" Nozomi then says that all he has done is for her sake. Even her joining the party seems to be because he wanted to protect her, adding that she knows that he had brought her to the party so that he could focus on fighting, while thinking that if some danger arises, she'll throw her life away in order to save Kana. And Kana gets shocked to hear this and asks her if she's okay with that. She says that in the beginning she wasn't, but now she is, saying she trusts Meguru. And besides, she is certain that he'll win no matter what. Then turning and giving a pose that I'm swearing is not my wallpaper, she said, "So trust in him because he'll need your support and buffs in order to win." And then he starts explaining that not him, but every member of the party would need her help, pointing out how it's common knowledge to protect the party's healer, so she has nothing to feel guilty for. Just like that, the days pass and the party is ready for heading out to another dungeon raid. The chief, that bastard, had informed them at the last minute about an urgent dungeon request. Nozomi says she is ready to throw some hands, and then turning to Kana, she asks if she is ready. Meanwhile, Kana was thinking to herself how she would want Meguru to still give up on revenge, but she knows that bastard isn't going to give in, so in the end she'll have to give in. Later reached the dungeon site, and man, it's a real mess. The thing had popped up right in the middle of the city. Meguru just looks at it and goes, "Well, this is inconvenient. People can't even get to the shops like this," prompting Nozomi to say, "So this must be the reason why the chief had requested them to clear the dungeon as soon as possible." Meguru says that it doesn't matter. All he cares about is getting his hands on the Philosopher's Stone as soon as possible, and heads inside the dungeon. As they head deeper, Kana points out how the place looks pretty ordinary. Nothing special. Nozomi agrees, yeah, not only does it look normal, it's easy too. She points out how they breeze right up to the boss's chamber. Overconfident by their smooth progress and unable to get her excitement down, Nozomi heads towards the chamber without any care in the world. As she takes the first step, she triggers all sorts of traps. But thanks to her night class and strong build, none of it does any real damage to her. But unlike her, Kana could be poked with millions of holes. So Meguru decides to use his search skill and finds out that the whole way ahead is filled with traps. He told the brute to be careful and how the needles would be flying out if they were to take a wrong step. Nozomi comments on how anyone that would come for the first time would fall for it, causing Meguru to say that indeed, that's how the A-rank dungeons are designed. They are cruel and unpredictable, so one must always be on their guard. And right on cue, some pumpkin monsters appear. Meguru casts a quick spell, taking them out before he even finishes his sentence. Then he lays out his genius plan. First, he casts a massive fireball that just incinerates all the traps. Then he tells Nozomi to lure as many monsters as she can, while Kana provides her with buffs and heals. The girls get right to it without wasting a second. While Nozomi charges at the monsters recklessly, of course, Kana provides her support from behind. And our boy just stays in the background, commenting on how they are doing their tasks flawlessly. He then decides it's time for him to lend them a hand as well. So he conjures a lightning spell, goes to a nearby pumpkin monster, and lets the chain effect do its thing. After all of the pumpkins were thoroughly cooked, he turned to the group and praised them for their performances. Looking at the poor pumpkin monsters, Nozomi thinks to herself, so this is what happens when Meguru focuses on offense. She then turned to Meguru and said, "Hey Meguru, I want to make fighting as easy for you as possible, but I don't have the defense to be your vanguard. So tell me, how can I deal with stronger opponents?" Meguru puts his hand on his chin and thinks for a second before saying, "We can't just go and raise your defense in one day, and you're limited by your job as well. In that case, let's try raising your agility. No matter how powerful the opponent's attacks are, it won't matter if they can't hit you." She asks him how she can do that since it's the same as defense, she can't raise it in one day. And Meguru, this glorious bastard, just goes, "Oh, don't worry about that. There's a spell for that." And then turning to Kana, he says, "While I'm doing that, I'll teach you a new debuff as well, Kana." An hour later, they're knocking on the boss's chamber door, ready to throw hands with whatever monstrosity is inside. And what do you know, it's another overgrown pumpkin. Seeing this, Meguru turns to the girls and says, "Time for some practical training." As he says that, Nozomi charges at the monster, trying to draw its aggro and dodging its attacks. Ready in the back, Kana waits for the signal. Nozomi gives her a nod, and that's when Kana starts conjuring the new spell Meguru taught her. This time, our boy had taught her poison that drains the target's vitality over time. And with perfect teamwork, they were able to neutralize the boss and left the rest to Meguru, who took down that monstrosity with the help of his ice magic, earning a Philosopher's Stone in the process. While our heroes were busy fighting monsters, Fatty and Futaba were enjoying their stay at an amusement park in Chiba. Fatty, who always wanted to talk about work, wanted to discuss the details of their next plan. And Futaba, who actually doesn't give a damn about it, just goes, "Sure, you've thought of all of it, haven't you?" And that's when Fatty started explaining his plan, saying how the mana crystals are buried somewhere in Japan and how normally they would have no choice but to comb through the whole country. Then he slams a pouch on the table and says, "But I can use these to gather them all in one fell swoop," and then goes on to list out the problems with the plan, saying how it will take a while and that doing it this way would really make them stand out. And if some powerful hunter were to interrupt him during the process, things could turn real ugly for him. Futaba's expression hardens as he mentions that, and she says, "So you mean Meguru, right?" Fatty nods and then tells her, "So not to let it happen, we'll have to fake Matsuba's death." Futaba comments on how the plan is foolproof. Taking out a crystal from the bag, Fatty says, "Yeah, it is, but we never know. Something might happen." Telling her to always be ready for a fight, and she casually agrees to that. Seeing how she is not taking it seriously, Fatty told her that he is seriously counting on her, so not to mess this up. Meanwhile, back at the Hunters Association, Meguru and the team were once again at the armory. Pulling out the sword Meguru had picked last time, the chief asks him if this one will do, and Meguru just nods while thinking to himself how he didn't realize he'd need such a strong weapon as a base for enhancement if he wanted the best results. Looking at the weapon, the chief says it's not much, but this is better than any of our current weapons. Turning to the girls, he adds, "It appears your companions have also found weapons for themselves." Since they all had their gear picked out, the chief told them to follow him and led them down to the basement. After they had reached the basement, he then takes the weapon from Meguru and explains that they use this place to develop the equipment that lets them manifest monsters for the promotion exams. Handing the sword to a scientist, he told him to start the enchantment process. The guy doesn't waste a single second and gets right on it. Before long, the process was complete and the chief handed the sword back to Meguru. Seeing how it looked exactly the same, Meguru asks if he's sure the process is finished. So he takes the sword to practice a few swings. He gives it a half-hearted swing since he is inside a facility, but the result completely surprises him. He comments on how the blade had gotten so much more powerful, thinking to himself, "Man, who would have thought technology would improve this much in just 100 years?" Seeing the shocked expression on Meguru's face, the chief decides it's the right time to drop some of his wisdom. He told him that enhancement that uses the enormous energy a Philosopher's Stone contains was a newly discovered technology that their R&D team had created in recent years. This causes Meguru to smile as he asks the chief if the heroes know about this technology. And the chief shakes his head, saying that the heroes have no clue that they have developed this technology. He thinks how, thanks to their new equipment, the group's combat power has almost doubled. Nozomi can now tank hits better, while Kana's new staff significantly reduces the time it takes for her to cast a spell. The chief was about to request something when he got an urgent phone call. After he was done with the call, the expression on his face was practically screaming that something had gone terribly wrong. Meguru asks him if it's something that they can help him with. With a dead serious expression, the chief told him that out of nowhere, monsters had started pouring out of Matsubara's dungeon. Meguru asks the chief if that means what he thinks it means, and the chief nods. Yes, indeed. Monsters swarming out of a dungeon can only mean one thing, that Matsubara is dead. The chief then asks Meguru to put aside everything he was doing and focus on taking care of Matsubara's dungeon. Because if they let things stay like that, it wouldn't be long before the fire spread to all of Japan. The chief starts laying it all out, explaining that since the dungeon master is gone, there's a high chance the whole place is going to start collapsing. He thinks for a second and tells them they can refuse the request, saying he doesn't want to force them into a suicide mission. But our boy Meguru just says he'll do it. Why? Because he wants to, and if he doesn't, who else on the planet can handle an S-rank dungeon? The chief's face just lights up, telling them to hang on while he gets a transport aircraft ready for them. A little while later, our boy and the team are on their way to Shanghai. But of course, trouble finds them before they can even land. The entire airport is swarming with monsters. The pilot gets on the radio, yelling that they can't land there, and they'll have to find another way down. The crew suggests they parachute in, but Meguru just shakes his head and tells them there's no need for that. Kana and Nozomi just look at each other, dumbfounded, probably wondering what this dumbass has planned this time. Without wasting another second, he pushes Nozomi right out the open door. Princess carries Kana and jumps out after her. As she's falling, Nozomi is cursing her soul out, thinking to herself this is how she's going to die. But before she can hit the floor, Meguru uses an anti-gravity spell, causing all of them to land safely. He apologizes to her, saying he didn't have time to explain everything, before shifting his gaze to the monsters. He conjures up his eye magic, filling the sky with ice spears, wanting to take care of the mess as soon as possible. Within an instant, he subjugates all of the monsters. Then, turning to the local hunters, he asks them if they understand the situation they're in. The hunters tell him they don't know exactly what's going on, but they're sure about one thing, that bastard Matsubara is releasing these monsters deliberately. He adds how this situation is eerily similar to 20 years ago, when the national uprising was suppressed. Listening to this, Meguru thinks to himself that bastard is doing something stupid again. But unlike the locals, he was aware that Matsubara was dead, and he decided to share that information. The locals start talking among themselves, saying how that can't be true since they just saw the bastard a moment ago. This gets Meguru's attention. He then uses his search skill and finds out how unusual this situation is. Usually, he would detect 2 sources of magic, one from the dungeon and one from the owner, but right now, he can only detect one. That could only mean one thing: the dungeon master was gone and the dungeon was collapsing. He then turns to the locals and asks them if they really saw him, and the hunter confirms it. He was about to contact the Hunters Association to let the chief know about the situation when he sensed a cold, murdering intent from behind, only to find out that it was that bastard Matsubara who was planning to attack them. Meguru instantly summons his sword from his inventory and intercepts the attack, thoroughly confused by this situation. That's when Matsubara asks him, "Were you looking for me?" Meguru's still shocked, asking him what the hell he's doing here. Kana turns to Meguru and asks, "Didn't you just say the dungeon is overflowing because the dungeon master died? So why is he here?" Meguru just says he has no idea. Clutching his sword, he mutters to himself, "I'll think about it after I deal with him," pointing his sword straight at the guy. Matsubara just clenches his teeth and lunges at Meguru with that giant hammer of his, the one that's definitely compensating for something. Meguru sidesteps his attack and mutters, "What's happening? You're not as sharp as usual." Matsubara scratches his head and says, "Don't be ridiculous. That's not true." But Meguru just fires back, "No, I just fought you not long ago, so I can't forget right now. You're weak as hell, bro." Then looking at his sword, he thinks to himself, "My stats have definitely gone up and I got this new sword, but the gap between us was too vast for something like this to overcome." But today, Matsubara doesn't have the same intensity as before. Taking a good look at him, he says it's like he's a completely different person today. Matsubara then charges at him, yelling, "Hey, don't zone out in the middle of the fight." But Meguru stops his attack easily and then, with a swift move, flings the giant hammer right out of his hand. Conjuring up a spell, he says, "I don't know what's going on here, but right now, you're weak as hell. So I'll not waste any more time. I'll finish you with this strike." Seeing this, Matsubara goes, "Looks like I have no choice but to use my trump card." Meguru launches a fireball at him, saying, "Stalling for time with small talk won't work on me." The fireball burns Matsubara to a crisp. As the smoke clears, Meguru sees 2 very familiar silhouettes. And when the smoke is gone, he sees 2 exact copies of himself standing there. The girls ask him what's going on and why there are 3 of him, while Kana adds that at this rate, she'll lose track of him. And Meguru just mutters to himself, since when was this bastard capable of doing this? The 2 copies of him, one wielding a sword while the other one uses magic, both say at the same time, "We have the same abilities as you." Now the tables have turned, and then they charge at him. Meguru counters the first one effortlessly, thinking to himself how the technique this clone is using is the same as his, but the power behind the blows is weaker. Just then, his other clone attacks him with magic. Meguru dodges his attack, thinking how dealing with multiple opponents at the same time is a pain in the ass. The clone launches another fireball while he's busy dealing with the other one, and Meguru doesn't notice it until it gets dangerously close. He intercepts the fireball at the very last moment with an attack of his own, barely making it out of that one. He then notices the symbol on the clone's hands, thinking to himself how it's different from before, wondering if those patterns change. But then he quickly dismisses the idea, saying all these inconsistencies will start making sense if I assume that this guy is fake. Then he finally figures it out. It's the fatty's doing. He recalls that the fatty's ability includes summoning creatures at will, thinking to himself that he must have killed Matsubara and then summon him as one of his own. Meguru grins, looking at the clones as he says, your emblem's power lets you copy other people's appearances and techniques, but you can't copy their actual stats, can you? He then bites his thumb as blood starts to come out and one of his skills activates. Turning to the clones, he says, this light is a magical glow that can only be produced by my blood. And with this, we can distinguish the fake, right? Kana and Nozomi nod in agreement. Meguru then says, I've figured out how to beat you guys, as he orders the girls to follow him. Our boy puts the pieces together. He thinks to himself that the clones' strength might probably depend on how much juice Hidaka pumped into them. So when he split the magic to make two clones, they must have gotten weaker, and that was what he was counting on. Meguru was planning to use that exact weakness to his advantage. He orders Nozomi to take the sword guy, saying that he'll handle the other one. And she doesn't waste a damn second, charging right at the clone. The second clone tries to butt in, but Meguru is right there to counter its attack. Just then, Kana jumps into the mix, slapping a debuff on the clone fighting Nozomi. Now that the clone was weaker, Meguru easily knocked the sword right out of its hand. He leans in and says, you're supposed to be me, right? You should have seen that coming and reacted. And he shoves his sword right through its chest, taking it down without much effort. Then shifting his attention to the other one, he conjures a fireball as he thanks the two girls, saying he wouldn't have been able to deal with the situation without their help. The second clone gets folded just as easily as the first. Once he's done with the two of them, he wipes some sweat from his face, thinking, why did that fatty go through all this trouble to create these fakes? What's that fat bastard planning? But he drops that thought, focusing on the problem at hand as he enters the S-rank dungeon. Once they're inside, Kana mutters how she's never seen a dungeon like this, and Nozomi chimes in saying normal dungeons don't have this many different kinds of monsters. Meguru just nods, saying this place sure is packing a wide variety of monsters, and then proceeds to absolutely wreck shop. He turns to the girls and says, but none of these small fries are any threat to us. Both girls just shout back, speak for yourself, dumbass. Though these monsters were stronger than most of the monsters they had fought, they were determined to prove themselves. Nozomi comments on how the beasts in here are almost at the same level as the ones they fought outside, adding how they sure are tough, but thanks to their new weapons, they can take them down. Meguru, who had just taken care of a beast of his own, adds it's not just the weapon, it's the user. If the user isn't skilled, then the weapon is pointless. The fact that you've managed to keep up with me is proof that you guys have gotten stronger. After fighting through waves of mobs, they were finally at the boss's chamber. Looking at it, Meguru says, alright, let's open it. As they open the gate, they're greeted by some weird-ass hybrid between a gargoyle and a goblin. That bastard lunged at the group the minute they entered. Nozomi charged in like always with those agile moves of hers, drawing the aggro of the boss while Meguru was in the back charging up his spell. So while the boss was busy dealing with her, he attacked it from behind and it worked. A few of his ice spears managed to injure the boss. Then he himself decided to enter the battlefield. He charged at the boss and used the Abyss spell on it while it was still dealing with Nozomi. And just like that, the S-rank boss got folded so easily. The girls looked at each other, all smiles and happy, celebrating their victory. But Meguru looked at the shimmering portal and told them that the real challenge starts now, telling them to stay sharp. Nozomi asks him what he's talking about, saying, wasn't that dude the boss of this dungeon? Meguru looked all confused by their question as he said, judging by the sheer amount of magic coming from this dungeon, there's no way this is the final room. After all, this is an S-rank dungeon.